Or not. This was Eris we were talking about. To her, there was no real difference between a kitten and a lion. Even if these guys were suspicious enough to worry Lilia and Sylphie, they were little more than mild delinquents as far as Eris was concerned. No, I shouldn't be relying on Eris anyway. She's pregnant right now. Plus, I was the one who started all of this. I need to be the one to handle it.
All right, I'll go take care of it.
I had no intention of dictating who Aisha could and couldn't hang out with. Sometimes, the people society deemed unsavory weren't that bad once you got to talking with them. There were still boundaries, though. Aisha wasn't an adult yet. If these guys were trying to make use of her with little regard for the consequences, then I, her older brother, would shoulder the burden of stepping in to save her. No doubt Paul would do the same.
Actually, Paul would probably be classified as a shady character himself. Do you know where their hangout is?
I can lead you there.
But she was pregnant. Should I really let her come with me? She'd probably try to jump in and fight if things took a violent turn. I couldn't risk that.
I'm going to.
No, I'm going to go alone. I'd been picturing the worst-case scenario in my mind, but who knew if anything fishy was indeed afoot? With that as my justification, I headed out to see this hangout Aisha had been frequenting. I'd hardly had time to breathe since getting home from my latest assignment, but there was no use complaining about that. Sylphie tipped me off about their location, the third block of the Adventurers District. The two-story building, constructed of magic-resistant brick, was far removed from the main thoroughfare. An impressive abode that somewhat resembled an adventurer's guild or a pub, the door looked too new to be the original and was painted an inky black with the emblem of a ferocious tiger in the middle. As I moved toward the door, a group of men exited who were clad entirely in black. They wore identical coats with that tiger emblem emblazoned on the back. For reasons I could only guess, they were all carrying hoes and sickles.
Okay, boys, here we go. Whew.
They pumped each other up as they walked past me, heading for the main road. That was unsettling. They were like a bunch of crazed sports fans heading out to cheer at a baseball game. No doubt they'd been convinced tigers were more powerful than any lion and were headed out to brawl with some lions as combat practice. Now that's just plain terrifying. Am I going to be okay? Thanks to Orsted's training, I had become even stronger. I'd even stopped by the office to equip my magic armor for this occasion, just in case. I would be fine, surely. No way was I going to lose to a couple of low-ranking thugs. And anyway, I couldn't back down simply because they were scary. My adorable little sister Aisha was hanging around these ruffians. No matter how clever she was, she would be powerless in a fight. At least they let her go home at night, but there was no telling what they'd been doing to her during the day. I had to save her, no matter how many enemies came at me. This would all work out. I already knew what tactics I should use when faced with overwhelming numbers. Land 3 punches, then spin around for a second and throw one fist at the air and turn back and punch 3 more times. Just like in Final Fight and interrupting the combo so you could start it from the beginning and knock out your opponent. That'd be enough to take them out. Pit, pardon the intrusion. I nudged the door open and stepped inside. Something akin to a lobby spread out before me. A wide space dotted with barrels at certain intervals. Why barrels? Because they were serving as makeshift tables. There were several people sitting around them with liquor bottles in hand, merrily chugging away. Exactly like a pub. One thing set it apart, however. Each person here had the same black coat with the tiger emblazoned on the back. Oh crap. Now I'm shaking in my boots.
You got some business here?
One of them, a beastman, with the face of a lion, noticed me and strolled over. He was taller than me, and bulkier. His coat barely fit over what was bound to be some impressive musculature. Unfortunately for him, bulk didn't correlate to fighting capability. Neither Orsted nor Ruijerd looked like ripped macho types, but they were ridiculously powerful all the same. Well, you see, my sister. I came to see her. Could you, perhaps, tell me if she's here? It was important to be well-mannered. Even if my power dwarfed this guy completely, there was still protocol to be followed. Part of the secret to my success in making it in this world was being polite to everyone I met for the first time. It most certainly was not because I was intimidated. No, sir.
Your sister, huh?
Suspicious, the man scrutinized me for a moment before scanning the lobby. Now that I had calmed down a bit and could look around, I noticed that there were a large number of women, even among those dressed in all black. They didn't necessarily look shady, but they all looked like warriors with a past. If nothing else, they'd lived far tougher lives than the students attending the University of Magic. I guess that made them somewhat shady. Even so, Aisha was not among them.
Excuse me for a sec.
What? You want a piece of me, huh? Who do you think you are? Just so you know, I'm good friends with Orsted.
I tensed up, ready for this to get ugly, but the guy just sniffed the air around me. Apparently he was checking my smell. That's kinda embarrassing. I tilted my head, confused. Midway through, his brow furrowed. He froze and studied my face for a moment, then retreated a couple of steps.
Crap. Do I really stink that badly? I guess I did barely get home, so I haven't had a chance to hop in the bath yet.
Sorry, but, are you Miss Aisha's brother?
Apparently, he was able to figure that out from the sweaty stench of my unwashed body. Yes, that's correct. My name is Rudius Greyrat. Is Aisha present? Of course. It was important to do introductions. The first step of proper communication was giving your name and letting the other person know who you were affiliated with. I was quite famous around the city, so introducing myself was a good way of discouraging people from doing anything unsavory. The moment I spoke my name, the atmosphere in the room changed. Every person in the vicinity who'd heard my voice suddenly turned their gaze toward me.
Gray Rat, he said. So that guy there is... I knew I'd eventually see him for myself one day, but to think today would be that day.
I felt very, very out of my element. This can't be good. There was something familiar about this. As I recalled, Eris had once gone berserk in the past, and I had to go apologize to the group she beat up, a group like this one. The atmosphere right now felt the same. Perhaps Eris had already roughed these guys up. Wait, that'd be strange. In that case, why hadn't Aisha come back to us? Maybe Aisha had talked Eris down? Okay, but hold up. Then that would mean she's here of her own volition, right? Impossible. These guys had to be threatening her. Maybe I shouldn't have given them my real name. It might have been better to give them my alias, Rookwagmire, instead. It was too late for regrets, though.
That means you're the chairman?
He's our chairman. Chairman Rudius.
For some reason, all the people in the room started bowing. No normal bow, mind you. They all stood at attention and did the 45-degree bow as was proper Japanese etiquette. What made it more odd was that they all did it in unison. I blinked slowly. What the heck is going on here?
My deepest apologies for not recognizing you right away, Chairman.
Sorry?
The advisor is this way. I'll guide you there.
Advisor? All right then. I was having trouble keeping up with the course of this conversation. The man straightened his shoulders, tail fully erect as he motioned me deeper into the building. I may not have understood what he was talking about, but if he was willing to show me the way, the least I could do was physically follow him. We climbed to the next floor, where he led me to one of the innermost rooms and said, "Through there." It was fairly dark inside, and a portrait of a mysterious yet handsome man hung on the wall gave the place an eerie vibe. It was within this room where I found them, the shadiest people in the entire city. They wore the same black coats as the group I'd seen on the first floor, and despite it being nearly summer, they were sporting what resembled white mufflers around their necks. Even though the room was completely sealed and barely lit, they wore sunglasses. The pair sat opposite one another, grinning devilishly as they counted gold coins together.
Mew! It really was a good call to buy these sunglasses after all. The gleam of these gold coins would have blinded me otherwise, Mew.
One of the two cackled, wearing an unpleasant grin on her face. Perhaps it was the lack of illumination in the room, but her teeth seemed to glimmer like gold as well. The sunglasses made it impossible to make out her face, but I didn't have to see it to know the money had gone to her head. Her eyes were probably dollar signs right now.
As far as I was concerned, she already was blinded.
Almost forgot. Here's the fees for this month. Mew.
Very good.
The young girl beside her, also wearing glasses, nodded. She sat primly in her chair, arrogantly leaning back as if she were the boss of some big enterprise. She kept her chin held high as the other woman nudged over the pile of golden coins. There had to be at least 10 of them. From what I could tell, the coins weren't Asuran gold coins, but the type used here in Renoa Kingdom. The younger girl perfunctorily counted the money she'd been handed and tossed them into an empty coin bag lying nearby. She quickly jotted down the amount tendered and signed her name before passing the receipt over to the cat-eared woman.
There, payment received.
Yup! Mew.
And
Mew. And this is the consulting fee, Mew. With this, I hope I can expect you to keep working with me, Wow. Yeah?
why, of course. I intend to continue working with you for a long time to come.
Mew. You really are rotten to the core, aren't ya?
He... not nearly as rotten as you, Linnea.
Oh.
The younger girl's lips pulled into a devious smile as she replied. She dumped the money into a different coin bag before depositing it into the front of her dress, right in the valley between her breasts. Finally, they noticed the young beastman and me standing at the entrance.
Chairman Rudius is here to see you, Chief Linnea and Advisor Aisha.
Yes, indeed. The two figures in sunglasses before me were, in fact, Linnea and Aisha. The girls welcomed me and motioned for me to sit, so I plopped myself down on a couch while they took their seats opposite of me. What is this? What is going on? I decided I'd better get a feel for the situation before talking about anything else. After all, I did order the two to assemble a group of people. I did not, however, rent out this building or tell them to make everyone dress in black. There were also way more people here than I imagined.
Well, you see, Big Brother, we did as you told us to. We gathered people and did some business with them.
Uh-huh. Give me details. Aisha gave me the lowdown. After I'd left on my assignment, Linnea and Aisha immediately set about recruiting people. They mainly focused on students still attending the university, graduates, and people from the Adventurers Guild. Before they knew it, they had 30 members. That's right, 30 out of nowhere. With that many people, the little warehouse I bought to serve as our office was far too cramped. Aisha quickly sold it off, then used her own personal connections to solicit sponsors and rent this building instead. As for the portrait in the room of the handsome man, that was actually me. Zenoba had painted it in my likeness. He'd glorified my looks so much that it didn't resemble me in the slightest, though.
As you can imagine, there was no solidarity between our members since we cobbled the team together on the fly, not to mention how we didn't even have a concrete idea of how we were going to operate.
Since it took no time at all to pull people in, they had a long time to wait until I returned from my assignment. They would lose people if they didn't decide on a direction they wanted to go with the company. Aisha visited the floating fortress to consult Nanahoshi for that reason. She swiped the flute from my room, the one Perugius had given me in case I ever had need of him, and summoned Arumanfai to take her there. She then paid her respects to Perugius before seeing Nanahoshi and receiving some guidance. Huh? You met Lord Perugius?
Yeah, he was a pretty cool guy.
That sure was a bold and arguably dangerous move to do without saying a word to me. Perugius could have ended her life in seconds if she'd pissed him off. Though, no. He was pretty magnanimous after all, and way too level-headed to fly off the handle when dealing with someone as young as Aisha. Besides, if she innocently commented on how cool Perugius was, Silvaro would probably give her favorable treatment.
And so, you see...
Nanahoshi's suggestions were uniforms and proper manners. By having everyone wear the same clothes, it heightened their sense of solidarity so they wouldn't jump ship so easily, even if they didn't have a clear direction. On top of that, teaching them military customs and courtesies would increase clients' trust. Aisha took Nanahoshi's advice to heart and bought some cheap, overstocked clothes from one of her acquaintances' clothing stores. That's what resulted in the gloomy black coats.
Even Aisha realized that pure black outfits would be a bad look, so she bought some overstock yellow fabric from the same store using her own pocket money and then sewed rat emblems onto each coat.
Yes, rat emblems. She took inspiration from our gray rat name. Since it was yellow on black, I thought for sure they were supposed to be tigers. Phew, dodged a bullet there. Good thing I didn't tell her how cool I thought the tiger emblems were.
Once they were all in the same outfits, Aisha started teaching them proper manners, such as how to properly bow. The perfect 45-degree bow is what we call ojiji in Japanese. It was easy enough for anyone to pick up, and people would understand at a glance that the person was trying to be respectful. Anyway, that was how it all came together, an organization of people wearing all black and bowing their heads super low. With that out of the way, Aisha started to consider what they could make these new employees do. The majority of them were beast folk that Linnea had recruited. They didn't really have any talents outside of fighting. We're talking jock types addicted to bench pressing who couldn't even read numbers, let alone letters. There were some bright minds among them, but for every smart person, there were at least 5 more who were meatheads. The only idea that came to mind for a group like that was mercenary work, so that was what the girls decided to do. It also helped them to pick a name, which they derived from the very pseudonym I often employed, Rukwag's Mercenary Band. There was one issue, however. Sharia was right in the middle of the 3 magic nations, which were relatively peaceful places. There were no wars going on, and it would take too much time to deploy people to places that were embroiled in conflict. So Aisha devised the idea of a bodyguard business. For a set price, a person could hire several of our mercenaries for a period of time. One person would be appointed leader of the group, and they would call the shots during an assignment. If someone were to die or get injured on the job, the company would immediately send a replacement. In other words, they were leasing out bodyguards. Definitely not a crime gang. Absolutely not.
And once we opened a business, we immediately shot to fame.
With the Doldia tribe's princess acting as the company's leader, it managed to earn a peculiar amount of trust from the people. On top of that, Aisha's advertising and the personal connections of individual members quickly made the group popular. Within 14 to 15 days of the band's founding, they were already receiving requests from big shots like the Renoa Kingdom's Order of Knights, the Magicians Guild, and the Magical Implement Workshop. Their membership was increasing in the meantime, which was why they currently had 50 or so people about the city. Sharia had all sorts of people: knights, students, smiths, and workshop artisans, and so on. Factions naturally formed within this diversity, which resulted in a number of fights and minor spats. That created the need for a niche industry and neutral party that could protect those involved. If we didn't watch our step, the mercenary band could become a faction of its own, but that was why Aisha thought it best to accept requests from anyone without discrimination in order to maintain that neutrality.
We have been setting aside some of what we earn as company fees, but even then we've still raked in way more than I ever imagined.
You got that right. Mew. Everyone pays us way more in fees than we even thought they would. They're honest people. The lot of them, Mew.
So they made a bodyguard organization that's slightly different from the Adventurers Guild. They'd also turned over a pretty decent profit in the process, making for a smooth start to our business. Of course, the total amount of revenue was nothing big. It would still take a very, very long time before Linnea could repay all that she owed. But even so, if we expanded our business or changed our services after filling our coffers, she might be able to repay it pretty quickly. In fact, I didn't mind writing off the rest of what she owed once she'd returned at least half of it. I wasn't really after money anyway. Honestly, this was completely different from what I had pictured in my head. No, maybe that didn't matter. If things were going smoothly, then that was good enough. I never dreamed things would work out this well. I suspected Aisha's skillful touch was responsible for this venture's success. She was a genius, and if she hadn't been serious about doing this, it would have taken much longer for the business to get off the ground. I never thought she would be this dedicated. I didn't realize you loved money this much, Aisha.
Hey, that's not it at all. The only thing I love this much is you. Big brother, you said this would be to my benefit, so I gave it 110%.
Aisha, her eyes glimmered as she looked at me. Gosh, she was so cute. If only she wasn't my sister, then I might be tempted.
Also, it'd be a big pain if this cat came back to the house.
Ah, that's probably the real reason. I thought they seemed to be getting along so well, but I guess maybe I was mistaken, huh? Nah, that's one thing. This is another. Well, whatever the case, you did a good job.
Thank you.
Circumstances aside, at least we'd found a way for Linnea to start repaying her debt. There had to be some promising talents at the office too, considering how many they had gathered. Surely one of them would have a knack for trade. Maybe I could find someone to work at Orsted's company as well as someone to hire as our store clerk to help us sell Ruage figures. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that they'd come this far in only a month, but that was Aisha for you. I might have underestimated just how capable she was. Still, Miss Lilia has been worried, so let's sit down and have a little talk at home.
Wait, but Mother is so hard-headed. She won't understand even if I explain it to her, and I want to keep doing this kind of work for a little while.
It'll be okay. I'll explain to her that I asked you to do this. I'd feel wrong forcing her to continue if she was unwilling, but strangely, Aisha was pumped to keep going. I'd let her if that was what she wanted. Plus, seeing how much she had accomplished here made me feel like it was a waste to simply keep her as a maid in the house.
All right. I trust you, big brother. You know, she's really soft when it comes to you. So make sure you explain everything to her properly, okay?
And with this, I had my own subordinates under the company name Ruquag's Mercenary Band. I'd never had people working under me like this. I could use them for all kinds of things for me in the future. So many possibilities opened up before me.
Oh, yeah, boss.
Lost in my thoughts, I was just about ready to take Aisha home when Linnea called out. What is it?
Got a letter recently from the Great Forest, Mew.
Huh, from the Great Forest? Written by Persena, I assumed. Linnea passed it to me. I noticed it was addressed to her, and she'd already opened it and read the contents. There was no name to indicate who'd sent it, which made me wonder how she knew. Came from the Great Forest. Perhaps the scent. Without wasting any time, I pulled out the letter tucked inside and glanced over the contents. My breath caught in my throat. The writer wasted no time with seasonal greetings or anything of the sort. Their message was simple and short, penned in the beast tongue. Big trouble! The sacred beast has gone missing. Calling for an emergency search and rescue.
For his part, the sacred beast said to leave it and not worry about it, so it's probably no big deal, Mew.
Silently, I resolved to visit the Great Forest. It'd probably be a good idea to take a gift along as well, as a form of apology. Ruquag's Mercenary Band, Chairman, Rudis Greyrat, Acting CO, Linnea de Doldia, Advisor and Vice Chief, Aisha Greyrat, number of employees, approximately 50, affiliation, part of the Orsted Corporation, consultant, silent 7-star. Chapter 8, Revisiting the Doldia Village. I brought Linnea and the sacred beast Leo along on the trip to the Great Forest. Eris desperately wanted to come along as well, but I asked her to stay behind given how heavily pregnant she was. Her stress was probably mounting since she'd recently lost her toy, Linnea. Taking her to a village filled with beast folk in that state would only dare her to try and kidnap someone else to take home with us.
I don't want to go back. If I do, I'll just be forced to act as Persena's minion.
Unfortunately, I didn't think I could earn their trust if I went alone. I needed her help persuading them. My bad, I should have written them a letter right after I summoned Leo here. I screwed that up for sure. Anyway, even though beast folk tended to be stubborn, I was a more mature person now. Things certainly wouldn't go as poorly as they did the last time. I would make sure to explain everything properly, and I'd have the sacred beast and Linnea along for the trip. I left Aisha in charge of our mercenary band. She wouldn't have problems since she handled most of the administrative work to begin with. The members mostly looked to Linnea at the start, but they'd come to respect Aisha as well. Surely there'd be no issue with Linnea leaving for a bit to take a business trip. Honestly, this little journey did mean I was running behind on my work for Orsted. It was best to nip trouble in the bud before it got any bigger, though, so I wanted to get this out of the way first. If I didn't, I risked getting even more behind on my assignments. It would be a huge headache if a swarm of beast folk charged into Sharia a year from now trying to get the sacred beast back. When I explained things to Orsted and tried to impress the urgency of the situation upon him, he didn't seem particularly bothered by my request. He offered to watch over the house while I was gone, in fact. Thanks to my contributions, he'd laid far more groundwork against the man-god during this loop than any other, so he didn't mind me getting a little sidetracked. If anything, we had some breathing room. As much as I wanted to head straight for the office basement and hop on a teleportation circle to go straight to the Doldia village, our circle in the Great Forest was actually located quite a distance away from them. Instead, I decided to pay a visit to Perugius. Knowing him, I figured he might be aware of some abandoned teleportation ruins closer to the northern part of the Great Forest. When I visited, Perugius was leaning back in his chair as usual, surrounded by his 10 familiars and Silvarl. The missing 11th familiar had been deployed to the Asuran Palace to act as his representative.
The Great Forest, you say?
Is there a problem with that?
No. Do you plan to leave immediately?
The sooner the better, I figure. His face clouded over for a split second when I informed him I would be going to the Great Forest, as if he were hesitating. He acquiesced almost immediately, though, and agreed to act as my taxi. This man really is magnanimous.
That said, the sacred beast, that does bring back some unpleasant memories.
He glanced at Leo, brows drawn. I wondered what was behind that reaction, but he probably was acquainted with the previous sacred beast, having lived as long as he had. I had no idea what their relationship was, but why was he still making that face, knowing the current incarnation before him was our house pet? Leo didn't mind the way Perugius eyed him. He sat there looking poised. It was Linnea who seemed petrified. Apparently she'd met Perugius once before when she came here with Aisha, but she still hadn't gotten used to being in his presence. I'm sorry my little sister imposed on you the other day.
Think nothing of it. I like clever people like her.
Seeing that he wasn't particularly disgruntled by her intrusion, I imagined Aisha must have handled her visit with him well.
By the way, I hear you have had a daughter.
Yes. Did Aisha tell you?
How fortunate for you that you did not have a boy with green hair.
He spoke as if he was trying to suss me out. Yeah, it is a great relief that my child wasn't Laplace reincarnated.
Oh? Judging by your reply, I suppose Orsted must have told you about our people's ability to reincarnate.
He did.
In that case, be sure you don't forget this. When the day comes that Laplace reincarnates, I will kill him, regardless of if he happens to be your son.
That's terrifying. Well, personally, I'd like to pray that never happens. Personally, I was split on the matter of Laplace. According to Orsted, he was the last of the dedicated warriors to have continued fighting the man-god over a long period. That would make him an ally under normal circumstances, but he was defeated by the man-god. The resulting split in his personality resulted in one half deceiving Ruyerd and becoming bitter enemies with Perugius. That made him my enemy. If such a man was then born as my son, I wouldn't know what to do. I wasn't too worried, of course. Orsted implied he already knew exactly when, where, and under whose identity Laplace would reincarnate. My appearance may have altered the future, but since Laplace seemed to have a strong destiny of his own, I wanted to believe my presence wouldn't greatly influence that.
That said, I have no desire to cross blades with you. If anyone resembling Laplace is born into your family, you should consult me first.
He spoke as if trying to counsel me as he got up from his throne. I had no idea what consulting him would involve, but judging from his tone, it didn't seem like he'd let Laplace slip away at all. Perhaps agreeing not to kill him outright and without warning was Perugius's way of showing mercy.
Now then, I will begin preparations for your teleportation circle. Wait in your room for a bit.
I decided to pay a visit to Nana Hoshi while the teleportation circle was being prepared, but she wasn't in her usual room. I meandered through the halls, wondering where she could have gone when I encountered Miss Yuzuru of Atonement, and asked her where Nana Hoshi was. It turned out that at this time of the day she was busy learning about the practical application of teleportation circles. There was a lot of information to digest and remember, which had to be rough. I fully intended to pitch in to help in if she needed, but for the moment I'd leave the potato chips and salted rice bowls for her to find later. Some nostalgic food would be healing for the soul. After that, I went to my assigned room and waited patiently. Lynia's eyes lit up when she saw how opulent the rooms were. She wasted no time diving onto the plush couch.
You being unfazed, I get, but Aisha being fearless is another story. Boss, can't believe she can act on equal footing with someone that terrifying Mew.
Lynia stretched out her body as she grumbled. I had no idea what Aisha had discussed with Perugius, but knowing her, everything must have gone well. Perugius seemed pretty chill about their encounter as well. My only worry was Aisha's occasional propensity to say what she was thinking even if it was insensitive or offensive. Maybe I'd better take some preemptive measures to make sure she doesn't step on Perugius's toes. Lynia, none of us are on equal footing with him. We're all beneath him. The only reason Aisha was forgiven for being so brazen is because Lord Perugius is a magnanimous man.
Think so? Mew? Sure he's not just terrified of that big bad dragon god, boss. You got behind ya? I haven't met him myself, but he's pretty scary, right? Cliff was a trembling mess. Mew.
Hey, knock that off. That's not true at all. You're the fearless one, or maybe reckless is the better word. Perugius could overhear every word of our conversation. This was the equivalent of squeezing water from a dirty dish rag into someone's tea before serving it. Honestly, I couldn't believe the nerve of her. Not long after that conversation, a grumpy Silveril showed up. As I suspected, she'd overheard us.
Lord Perugius is a magnanimous man, and he thinks of you as a close friend.
There was no need for that. I wasn't getting ahead of myself, and I'd prefer it if she didn't take what this idiot cat said seriously. Besides, it was a great honor being considered a friend by someone as awe-inspiring as Lord Perugius. I said as much to Silveril, trying to butter her up, but my attempt was apparently a little overdone because it did nothing to soften her bad mood.
Preparations are complete, so please come this way.
Silvaril guided us to the basement of the fortress. It was the same dark, dank maze we descended into on our trip to the Demon Continent. In one of the dimly lit rooms, we found Perugius and Nanahoshi standing side by side. Before them was, unsurprisingly, a teleportation circle. It wasn't emitting any light. They must not have activated it yet. As I waited, wondering what the holdup could be, Nanahoshi took a deep breath, holding a magic crystal in her hands.
You're only putting into practice what you already know. No need to feel nervous.
Right. Rudius, go ahead and get on it. I apologize in advance if I mess something up.
Her face was tense with anxiety as she motioned us toward the circle. From the look of things, she was going to be the one to activate the circle this time, so we were going to be her guinea pigs, huh? I shouldn't complain. I was the one who came and asked for a favor out of the blue.
Silvaril, did you hand them the map?
Oh, pardon me. I nearly forgot.
Silvaril fished a map out of her pocket and handed it over. I opened it and studied it. The Dolgia village was near the edge of the paper, so I could only assume we'd be teleporting to the ruins in the middle. It looked like the village was half a day's travel away. Perhaps it was because the whole place was covered in forest, but the two locations looked fairly close by. I decided to show Lynia and see what she had to say.
I know where this is, Mew. Don't worry. It's pretty close, Mew.
Now let's get started.
All right.
Nanahoshi knelt and drew the magic crystal close to the circle. With a brush in hand, she began drawing something on the ground.
Just to be on the safe side, we're only going to activate the circle for a moment. Once you're over there, you'll need to figure things out yourself. Understood?
Yes. Understood. Since they were still busy setting everything up, my mind didn't really register the words as I gave a perfunctory reply. I only started to contemplate the meaning of what he said after that. Would there be a lot of beasts awaiting us? No, wait. Considering the time of year, perhaps...
Hey, about what you said?
Alas, Nanahoshi had already finished her preparations. Once she'd drawn the circle with her brush, she put her magic crystal on top of it. The circle began to faintly glow afterward, and we found ourselves sucked in.
Orc! The next thing I knew, I was surrounded by water that rose all the way to my stomach. Below it, I spotted the magic circle that had brought us here. The light it had emitted soon disappeared.
I knew it! It's the rainy season.
Linnea squeaked, cradling Leo in her arms. Despite essentially being a dog, he held his head high as if he thought it was only natural for her to carry him, even though he was already completely soaked. To make matters worse, our luggage was waterlogged too.
Oh, great! That means my apology gift is probably sopping wet. The water was freezing. If we didn't hurry out of here and find a place to dry off, we risked catching a cold. Not that a cold really matters. A little detoxification magic will fix that right up. Those thoughts knocked around in my head as I began the search for some stairs, but I saw nothing that would help us to climb out of here. That left me with only one option. I called forth a lamplight spirit to aid me and finally located a stairway that led downwards. This was apparently the top floor of this building.
Boss, you gotta do something, Mew?
Hold your horses. Right now, we needed to go up. If the water level was this high, there shouldn't be water above us. With that in mind, I used my earth magic to create a step along the wall. I perched on it and reached to the ceiling. I grunted, using my magic to open a hole above me. I climbed outside only to find a heavy downpour and enormous trees lined up to the horizon. The canopy above obscured my view of the sky completely. Meanwhile, the ground below was being washed away by a raging flood. I might even be forgiven for thinking it was a river rather than a forest, but that was all the proof we needed to know we'd made it to our destination. There was no mistake about it. This was definitely the Great Forest. As I expected, the spot where I stood was at the very top of the ruins we'd teleported into, and the entire place was flooded.
This is real bad, Mew. What are we gonna do? This isn't how I imagined this going. Mew!
Linnea and Leo had also climbed up onto the roof with me. I can either freeze the water so we can walk across it, or I can make a boat and use magic to propel us.
Ooh, boss! I knew you had it in you, Mew!
But with the rain like this, I have no idea what direction we should even head in.
Yeah, with such bad weather and as lost as you. Mew!
So I figured this was no normal flood. The water had risen all the way to the very top of these ruins. It was probably about 5 meters high. Anything that might have normally acted as a landmark wouldn't be visible right now.
So, what should we do, Mew?
Should we wait for the rainy season to end?
When it does end, that'll be mating season, Mew. If that happens, I'll end up being someone's plaything, Mew.
Ah, right, mating season. It was one thing to resist her when we were at home, but I wasn't sure I could hold myself back on a trip like this. Perhaps it would be better to get going then. Or would it be better to go back and see if Orsted had some kind of item to help us along?
Woof!
Leo barked, puffing out his chest as he looked up at me. What's with him?
Yeah, mean it. Mew. Woof! You aren't the sacred beast for nothing, that's for sure, Mew.
I was a genius to bring Linnea along, considering she could understand him. Had to have someone bilingual to communicate with this dog. What's he saying, Linnea?
He knows the way. So, he said to make a boat. Mew!
All right, Roger that. Linnea was right. Leo's title wasn't meaningless. He was very capable. With that decided, I used my earth magic to conjure a boat. The issue with my earth crafting was that the more mana I concentrated into it, the heavier whatever I was trying to make became. However, by decreasing the intensity of mana that I used, I could also make something lighter. To construct a proper boat, I would need to use a honeycomb pattern and maintain mana density while shaping, making sure the center could contain air and give it buoyancy. It took a little more than an hour to complete the project. The end product was a misshapen square raft. Well, it floats,
and its propulsion is entirely based on my own magic. This should suit us just fine. All right, shall we be off?
You sure this is gonna be okay, Mew? Boss, did you run out of mana or something? I sure hope we don't sink halfway there. Mew!
If it starts going under, we'll stop midway and climb one of the trees and rest on the branches for a while.
Uh, I'm really not so sure about this, Mew. Woof! Oh, boss, he says to go that way. Mew.
Got it. Well then, off we go. I used my mana to control the surrounding waters, pushing us forward in the direction Leo indicated. 2 days later, we arrived at the Dolja village. It wasn't that far from the ruins, distance-wise, but we were accosted by monsters along the way and got pushed off course by the current, so we got a little lost. If we hadn't been lucky enough to drift onto the Holy Sword Highway, it might have taken another 10 days for us to find our way.
Hey, look, it's the sacred beast. Someone report this to Lord Guess.
The whole village erupted into a great fuss upon spotting us. Warriors came rushing out, almost like bees swarming out of a hive, and they were all fully decked out.
It's a human male. Don't tell me he's the one who kidnapped the sacred beast. Come to think of it, there was an incident just like this 10 years ago.
As our raft drew closer, the beast folk grew even more wary. The atmosphere was so tense that it seemed likely they might clap us in irons without any room for discussion. Oh boy, now what? They might capture me, strip me, and throw me in a cell again. Just as I was beginning to grow worried, Linnea stood up.
Everyone, I, Linnea Dedoldia, daughter of Guest Dedoldia, have made my return, Mew.
Ah.
The warriors froze, scrutinizing her face before they all began sniffing the air in unison.
It's true. That's really Linnea. She sure has great. Yeah. It's been like 12 or 13 years by now, right?
The air grew thick with nostalgia. I felt relieved for a moment, but that was soon shattered.
We already heard from Persena, you know. What was all that talk about you becoming a merchant, huh? You need to fulfill your duties here in the village.
They immediately started heckling us.
I knew it. Boss, get us out of here. I'm begging you, Mew.
I ignored her and propelled us the rest of the way to safe harbor. Nothing about the village had changed since I'd last been here. They were just as isolationist and hostile toward outsiders as before. At least I had Linnea with me this time, and there were quite a few who remembered me. I was last here 10 years ago. Those who had been children at the time were now warriors, but they remembered who I was after catching a whiff of my scent. There were also those among their veterans who recalled who I was as well. For example, the man who threw water on me all those years ago. He'd had 5 kids over the past 10 years and returned to his duties as one of their warriors. He sure was passionate about his job. While everyone was somewhat welcoming toward me, they were quick to start bashing Linnea.
How dare you? You're the chief's daughter, and you have the nerve to abandon your duties. You're a disgrace to our tribe.
Linnea hunched her shoulders and hid behind me. Tears welled in her eyes as she mumbled quietly,
This is exactly why I didn't want to come back here. Mew?
it was really her own fault. Things were like this. The villagers continued disparaging Linnea for a bit, at least until the sacred beast shook himself dry and drew their attention.
That's right. The sacred beast is far more important than Linnea.
Yeah, he's finally back with us.
Just where have you been all this time?
Linnea was forgotten as they focused completely on Leo. They kept asking where he'd been and how he got taken away in the first place. In the process, those present who weren't familiar with me gradually grew suspicious, eyeing me like they thought I'd been the one responsible for kidnapping him. This sure brought back memories. If someone blurted out, "Oh yeah, this is the pervert who fell in love with the sacred beast 10 years ago, right?" I would be thrown into jail for sure. While I was preoccupied with these musings, a loud voice boomed through the crowd.
Everyone quiet
quiet, Mew!
Shut up, all of you!
The two who came forward were female warriors Minotona and Tersena. I recognized them. I had even saved them in the past. They acted as leaders, quieting the crowd as they strolled up to me.
There's no point in making a fuss here, Mew!
You can give us the details at the chief's house. Everyone, make way!
We were soon guided off to Guy's residence. Gas was now the chief of the tribe. The former chief, Gustav, had sustained a terrible injury fighting a monster during the rainy season a few years ago, which resulted in an early retirement. He had left Gas in charge of the village and was living out the rest of his days peacefully in another settlement. Perhaps that was why Guy seemed more dignified now. He seemed much more laid back. By the looks of things, the odds of me being framed for a crime I didn't commit were a lot lower this time. Relieved, I handed over the package of smoked meat I had bought in Sharia and brought as an offering. Then I started explaining the situation. I told them I was facing a powerful enemy, and I didn't want to be constantly anxious about my family's safety while opposing them. That was why I tried summoning someone or something to protect them, which resulted in the sacred beast appearing. He had thus become our guardian beast.
That's all a bit difficult to believe.
I didn't doubt that. I myself was shocked when Leo appeared, although I had been even more shocked at who appeared before Leo the first time I did it.
Woof, woof.
Leo barked from his spot beside me, sitting all prim and proper. See? He's backing up my story? I didn't actually have a clue what he was saying, but I assumed he was voicing his support for my version of events.
The only thing he mentioned was that the food in your house is supposedly delicious.
Sorry?
I jest. He said, I am there to be at his daughter's side, to do what must be done.
That was a joke? Guess, you rascal. You can actually tell jokes now, huh? Anyway, so Leo was interested in my daughter, huh? Lucy? Nah, probably Laura. He was really attached to her, after all. From what I had seen, he was almost always glued to her baby bed. Orsted had even agreed that Laura had special promise.
H. Destiny, you say?
Gas and Leo faced each other, seemingly engrossed in conversation. Alas, I had no idea what it was about because I didn't speak Woofanese. Linnea, can you interpret for me?
Oh sure, Mew.
Her interpretation let me listen in on their conversation.
True. There is a legend that 100 years after the sacred beast is born, a messiah will appear to save the world, and the sacred beast will supposedly aid them on their quest.
Woof.
Linnea's translation, tell me, what do you think the Doldia tribe's duty is, Mew?
Our duty is to protect the sacred beast until the savior appears.
Woof, woof. Woof, woof.
Linnea's translation, and I, the great and majestic sacred beast, have found that savior, Mew. This man's daughter is our savior.
I don't doubt that you're telling the truth. However, this is unprecedented for the Savior's father to summon the sacred beast directly and have him protect her from infancy.
Through Linnea's interpretation, Leo made a point of emphasizing his importance as he spoke. That level of arrogance reminded me of a certain buff demon king I had met in the past. Anyway, so my daughter was the savior, huh? Our little baby Laura with that impudent-looking face? Orsted had hinted something along those lines, but nothing concrete. It felt very surreal, somehow. Maybe I should start teaching her kung fu while she's young. You know, passing along my fatherly knowledge.
Woof, 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 woof.
Linnea's translation. The legend also talks about a possibility of the savior dying early. Tell me, do you recall what that entails?
According to the legend, if the Savior dies, the sacred tree will wither. The sacred beast will also grow weaker and weaker until death takes him.
Grr.
Linnea's translation. Someone is after my master's life. Is it your desire to snuff mine out as well?
No, that is absolutely not what we want.
Arf.
Linnea's translation. In that case, there should be no issue here. Again, Gas's expression soured. He glared at Linnea, who had been animatedly interpreting the conversation for me the entire time. Linnea withered under his gaze and hid behind me. This is why you gotta quit joking around. Yeah, I'm the one who asked you to interpret, but you're the one who took weird creative liberties and pissed him off. You goofed, so you need to deal with the consequences.
Linnea, is everything he's saying true?
Yes, it is, sir. He's there to protect Lord Rudeus's child, Mew.
It was rare for her to speak so politely. Apparently, even Sharia's arrogant delinquent was terrified of her father.
The human girl? It's only been 20 years since the sacred beast was born, so I was under the impression it would be another 80 years until he fulfilled his duty.
Technically, the girl is half human and half demon, so I think she'll have a long life, Mew.
Aha, I see. I didn't account for the possibility she might be a demon.
Gas crossed his arms over his chest, lost in thought. In the decade since I'd last seen him, he looked far more introspective than he once had. He was more the thoughtless type before, more likely to rush in headlong than to pause and consider his options. He seemed to have mellowed out a lot, much like the previous Chief Gustav. Perhaps there was something about maturing past 30 that helped soften beast folk. Would the same be true for Linnea? Nah, I was sure she'd be the same until the day she died.
There's no way a demon could be the savior. Mew!
Yeah, and he said he called the sacred beast to him with summoning magic. I'll bet he used some weird sorcery to trick the sacred beast.
Minitona and Tersuna sounded just like guys had in his younger days. Weird. I was pretty sure in the past they were grateful to me for my help. I guess being around the other beast folk for so long colored their view, huh? Their shift in attitude aside, they kind of had a point. I did use a magic circle devised by Perugius to summon Leo. The circle had conditions placed on it to make whoever was summoned from it completely obedient to me. Perhaps that had an impact on Leo, and his belief that my daughter was the savior was only a delusion.
No, the chances of that are slim. If that were the case, Lord Rudeus would not come all the way to our village like this. He lives on the other side of the world. It would have been hard for us to track him down and do something about him, so he would have ignored the situation if he was planning anything underhanded.
I guess so.
Yeah, about that. I should apologize. I actually did try to ignore it. Sorry about that.
Well, that should be enough regarding the matter of the sacred beast.
Are you sure that's wise?
He has spoken. Our job now is simply to obey.
Wah!
Leo barked as if agreeing, then promptly placed his head on my lap. I instinctively stroked his head and his expression turned to one of contentment. Miniota and Tersina looked entirely displeased, as if they found my actions impudent, but I ignored them. Back home, we did this all the time. Still, I was surprised that they accepted what Leo had to say so readily. I guess Linnea was right in the end. In fact, I seem to recall Ghislaine saying something similar too.
That said, Lord Rudeus, let's see. Yes, about 15 years from now. When your child has matured, please bring her here. I would like to follow custom and conduct the sacred tree ceremony. I'm sure it will be a difficult trek given that it takes about a year to travel from where you live, but I would still ask it of you. This is a part of our duty.
Very well then. A ceremony, huh? I had no idea what that entailed exactly, but I assumed it was some kind of formality. So we're going to celebrate Lara reaching adulthood in 15 years from now here in the Doldia village, huh? I'll have to write that down in my diary so I don't forget. At least that took care of the situation with Leo and much more smoothly than I thought it would. I let out a breath. I wasn't the only one relieved. I noticed the tension leave Gas's shoulders as well. The whole room seemed more relaxed. Gas glanced over at Linnea, who immediately flinched.
Now tell me, why is our brazen little alley cat Linnea staying with Lord Rudeus?
Oh, about that, actually. You see, she tried to get into the trade business, but she ended up racking up a huge debt.
So glad you asked, Mew. You see, I thought about throwing my hat in and trying out the trading business after I split with Persena, but then one day I received a divine revelation from the heavens. Mew! I followed their advice and returned to the magic city of Sharia. And would you believe who I found there? None other than the sacred beast himself. This is it. I thought to myself, the purpose for which I was led here, to look after the sacred beast and all his needs. So really, I haven't forgotten the duty our tribe's been tasked with. In fact, the whole reason I didn't come back was because, as one of our warriors, I was trying to fulfill my role. Mew!
Wow. It sure was impressive how she could pull so many lies out of thin air like that. Or perhaps she'd been contemplating what excuses to feed her father in advance. Gas eyed her skeptically, but Minitona and Tersena looked completely convinced. They had regarded her disdainfully moments before, but now they gazed at her with something bordering on reverence. These guys really are simple-minded. Although I had read in a manga somewhere that once people stop looking down on others and start to respect people, it facilitates their own growth. It made sense. Finding something good in an otherwise hopeless person reflected on one's maturity. But still, lying wasn't great. Pardon, Mr. Gas. Actually, she tried her hands at the whole trading business and racked up a bunch of debt. That's how she ended up being turned into a slave, and I stepped in to save her. Well, really, I just shouldered her debt for her.
Interesting.
Me? Boss, you're not supposed to tell them the truth.
Minitona and Tersena were back to giving her dirty looks. She's currently working at my place to return the money she owes.
So what you mean, Lord Rudeus, is that she is currently your slave, correct?
Now that I think about it, she is Guess's daughter. I can only imagine how he feels as a father, hearing that his child has been turned into a slave. If it were me, and I heard Lucy was a slave, I'd kill whoever owned her and set her free. No questions asked. Regardless, I couldn't bring myself to lie. Effectively, I guess you could say that. But to be clear, I am most certainly not treating her like a slave. I'm just helping her get back on her feet, as a friend.
I don't care whatever the circumstances are. She is the one who abandoned her duties for her ambition, only to end up in enormous debt and bring trouble to the door of our people's hero. I would be ashamed for anyone to even know she's from our village. So please, feel free to do whatever you want with her.
Oh, wow. Guess, man, you sure have turned into a man of reason since I last saw you. Actually, no. Judging by his face, he was actually lamenting the kind of woman his daughter had turned into.
Hey, Daddy, isn't that a bit cruel, Mew? I was in a real bind there, you know. If things hadn't gone the way they did, I'd have been a sex toy for some perverted nobles.
As I recall, Lord Rudeus, your libido was strong even as a child. Mating season should start soon enough. When that happens, you are welcome to use Linnea as you please.
Mew. Daddy, have you no concern for your daughter's chastity?
Silence. If you claim to be one of the beast folk, then you should offer your body freely to repay what you owe.
Fine, I understand, Mew. I was the one in the wrong. Mew.
She hid behind me again. Look, I don't mind if you use me as a shield, but don't push your breasts up against my back. I have no intention of doing anything to you, mating season or not.
At any rate, it is true that someone needs to be there to look after the sacred beast, and we haven't the means of returning the debt Linnea owes anyway. So please take her with you when you go.
Someone to look after Leo, huh? I didn't really think he needed that, but the Doldia tribe did have their duty to fulfill. If they wanted to watch over him, I had no reason to refuse them. Besides, it would be a bigger problem for me if Linnea did remain.
However, I do feel uneasy sending Linnea by herself.
That makes sense.
Boss, I'd really rather you not agree with him about that. Mew.
Unfortunately for her, I understood where her father was coming from. It wasn't because she was unreliable or anything, just that lately she was kind of leaning that way.
So one more person, then. Let's see. Ah, yes, what about taking Minitona or Tersena with you to look after the sacred beast?
The moment their names were mentioned, the two girls stepped forth, both fully decked out in leather armor with thick swords on their backs. They were both muscular with ample breasts. They'd been rather well endowed when they were younger, but they'd only matured since then. The beast folk were the perfect tribe for any fan of big chests.
I'll go Mew.
No, I will.
I'm better with a sword and smarter too, Mew.
She lies. We both attended the school in Zandport, and I was the one with the better grades.
Were they really that desperate to wait on Leo hand and foot? 15 years away from this place would kill any chance either of them had at becoming chief one day, if that's what they wanted, or was it a greater honor in their tribe to look after the sacred beast than to become chief?
Tersina may have had the better magic grades, but I was better at everything else, Mew.
That's not true at all, Tona, you big liar!
You're the liar, Tersina.
The two reminded me of Linnea and Persena, each defending their own position. Oh yeah, come to think of it. Has Persena not made it back home yet? Gas's expression immediately soured.
This way.
I was led to a building at the edge of the village. It was a familiar place for me, at least. Truly familiar. I had once lived here myself before. It was quite a comfortable little spot, although I did end up sharing it with a roommate at one point, a middle-aged man with a monkey's face. It had been a nice accommodation, even so, the security was top-notch and okay. Yeah, enough of the jokes. Basically, they brought me to the jail. Linnea refused to enter, apparently having had bad experiences with this place herself. Once inside, I stared silently. Persena was lazily stretched across a bed, looking utterly slovenly. They hadn't stripped her completely as they did me, but what she was wearing left her pretty exposed. She wore a plain, unsexy gray shirt and cropped pants. Her back was turned to us, and I watched through the metal bars as she stuffed her hand down the waistband of her pants to scratch at her tail. The complete lack of femininity was startling.
Hey, Persena, wake up.
Next effect about that prize.
It's mealtime.
It was the oldest trick in the book, and she fell for it immediately. As she stretched, the thin fabric of her shirt stretched across her breasts, which were as large as I remembered. Her clothes fit her like a glove, and it was poison to the eyes, the kind of poison that no amount of detoxification magic could cure.
I don't smell any food.
Persena's nose twitched as she glanced around groggily. Her eyes landed on us.
Persena, you have a visitor.
Persena blankly stared back at first, but the moment she saw me, her eyes flew wide open, and she lunged herself at the bars, clinging to them.
Oh, boss! You've got this all wrong. I'm innocent. I swear, you gotta help me.
This time, I was the one taken aback. Gas let out a long sigh. Chapter 9, The Case of the Jerky Thief. The incident took place 10 days prior, as the rainy season began in the Doldia village. Someone had murdered Wait, this isn't a detective novel. I mean, someone stole some dried rainforest lizard meat the village had stored for later consumption. Naturally, the warriors conducted an immediate investigation. There was only one suspect, a female warrior named Persena Adoldia. Persena was the daughter of the Adolgia tribe's chief, and she had only returned to the village about 6 months ago. She'd come back as an accomplished graduate of the Renoa University of Magic and promptly announced to everyone, as a candidate for future matriarch of our people, I have returned to fulfill my duty. By the way, Linnea is a big loser. And thus she entered the Doldia tribe's militia. The matriarch is the person at the apex of the hierarchy of the Doldia tribes, which included the Didoldia and the Adoldia. You didn't earn that kind of position simply by wanting it. You needed adequate strength and the trust of the other warriors, and it was also necessary to earn the position of warrior chief before the reigning patriarch stepped down. Persena had both the talent and accomplished history to ascend to the position of warrior chief, except for one small issue. She'd left the village before she could enter the militia's ranks and had spent over a decade away. She wasn't accustomed to being a part of the community. That was why the current chief and patriarch guys had agreed to let her train for the position. Once she was competent at her work in the village and had memorized all the scents and faces of the other members, she would be promoted to warrior chief. From there, she could someday earn herself the title of matriarch. You could call it an elite induction course. Since Persena knew high-level healing magic, she earned the other warriors' respect in no time. Gas was satisfied with her progress. Once the rainy season was over, he planned to have her marry, then he would promote her to warrior chief. That, sadly, was when the incident occurred. The night the food was stolen, Persina was on duty in front of their provisions storehouse. It was packed full in preparation for the upcoming rainy season, and at night they always had a group of 2 keeping an eye on the place. The person working alongside Persina at the time was another Adoldian warrior by the name of Kanaluna. Unfortunately, Kanaluna she was feeling ill that day. The day before, she'd been hurt fighting one of the many beasts that appeared in these parts, and the wound had festered without proper treatment. Kanaluna had claimed it was nothing to worry about, but the person working the afternoon shift before her attested. During the shift change, her face was white as a sheet. As was proper for an upcoming matriarch, Persina told her, "Go home and rest. I'll take care of things here." Kanaluna did as she was told and slipped into the nap room to catch a few winks. She only intended to rest her eyes for a little while, but she was out like a light perhaps because her body needed the extra sleep to heal itself. Early the following morning, a single warrior arrived at the storehouse for the shift change. But when he got there, he noticed that one of the guards who should have been present was nowhere to be seen. Thinking it suspicious, he looked inside the storehouse, only to find someone had broken in and ravaged the place, devouring things left and right. But that wasn't all. Persina was in there with crumbs all over her face, happily snoring away, having filled her belly. Persina was arrested on the spot for her crime. In the Doldia village, food theft during the rainy season was a serious crime. Whatever trust she'd built up with the other warriors evaporated, and her chances of becoming warrior chief, let alone matriarch, were obliterated. Anyway, that was how she ended up in the slammer.
Someone came up behind me that day and decked me in the head, knocking me clean out. The next thing I knew, I was inside the storehouse. Someone framed me, the sick bastard. Boss, I'm begging you. Search for the real criminal. I'll bet there was someone out there who didn't want me becoming the matriarch. Minotona and Tersena seem the most suspicious if you ask me. And anyway, none of it makes any sense. I'd never be stupid enough to get caught that quickly if I was really behind the theft. It would be too obvious, especially after I sent Kanaluna home. I wouldn't pig out like that either. I'd swipe stuff little by little so no one found me out.
She was insistent about her innocence. I could say from my first impression of them and from personal experience that the beast folk were skilled at wrongly accusing people. If Persena really was innocent, then I wanted to help her. I decided to do a little investigating. The Doldia village was a mix of dead Oldians and Adoldians. Since its primary duty was to look after and protect the sacred beast, many of its inhabitants were in the militia, but there also were many married couples and children since they raised their young here. It was a pretty large settlement of about 500 people, all living atop the trees. Since the land below them flooded completely during the rainy season, they were more like an island in the middle of a continent. This made it exceedingly unlikely that the culprit was an outsider. There couldn't be many out there who could navigate these stormy waters like I could. If we assumed that Persena was telling the truth, then the most likely explanation was that someone here had framed her. So with the help of my trusty assistant Watson and Police Inspector Gass, I set about gathering evidence and testimony from witnesses. And there you have it. Let's get going, Watson.
Who's this Watson, you?
That's you, Linnea. There's a certain country out there where people call their assistant Watson.
Okay.
Gass seemed to have no problems being given the title of police inspector, but despite that indulgence, he did sigh as if he thought this whole thing was an exercise in futility. So you're the one who first discovered the scene of the crime?
Yes.
Deja vu hit me the moment I spotted the man in question. I was pretty sure I had seen him somewhere before. Maybe I should ask. Have I met you somewhere before?
Yes. 10 years ago, I fell into the water and you saved me.
Oh, interesting. Come to think of it, 10 years ago, Ruijerd and I did save someone during the rainy season. I remembered the cute little boy wagging his tail at me in gratitude. Boy, that sure brings back memories. Anyway, that didn't matter right now. I had to focus on solving this mystery. When you found Persina 10 days ago, after she'd stolen into the storehouse and eaten all that food, how did the place look? Can you describe the scene for me?
Let's see. The boxes of lizard jerky were cracked open and Priscilla was curled up in front of them fast asleep. Her stomach was all bloated and she was cradling the food with her hands, a smile on her face as she mumbled to herself, "I can't eat another bite."
I could picture that so vividly in my mind, perhaps because it sounded almost exactly like the scene I'd witnessed a few brief moments ago.
In other words, no one actually directly saw her eating the jerky, correct?
That's right, although we did find some of the meat stuck between her teeth, and her saliva smelled like that of some of the half-eaten jerky she'd discarded nearby on the ground.
Huh. The Doldians sure did have a unique way of investigating. A person's innocence or lack thereof could be established by smell alone. They had absolute confidence in their schnozzes. As far as they were concerned, finding the scent of the stolen goods on someone's saliva was all the proof they needed. But it wasn't foolproof.
You say that her stomach was bloated with food, but am I correct in assuming you don't actually know whether it was the jerky inside her or not?
No, but her burp also carried the scent of the lizard meat. I've eaten it before, so I know exactly what it smells like.
Or maybe it was foolproof. Whoops. If they could detect the scent of whatever was inside her belly, then it was practically guaranteed that Persenna had in fact devoured the jerky. Assuming no one had cut her open with giant scissors and stuffed her stomach full of the jerky, that is.
Was there anything else? For instance, footprints belonging to someone other than Persenna?
No, no other footprints, no other scents, and no other hair found at the scene.
Interesting. Well, in that case, the true culprit had committed the perfect crime. Miss Canalana, what was Persenna like on the day of the incident?
She kept saying the same thing over and over. "I haven't eaten anything since this morning. I'm starving."
So Persenna was famished on the day of the crime. That was awfully strange, given the Persenna I knew was always chowing down on something, regardless of whether it was mealtime or not. She was like a garbage can, eating any kind of meat, dried, smoked, or raw. Something seemed amiss here.
And can you tell me why she hadn't eaten?
When we were exterminating monsters the day before, there were a bunch of people who got injured.
That had been written in the report as well. The day before, an enormous group of monsters had appeared. They were fortunate that no civilians were injured, but many of their warriors were badly hurt.
Persenna is the only one in the village who can use advanced healing magic. She was running back and forth constantly trying to heal all those who'd been seriously hurt. In the end, she collapsed from lack of mana.
I had experienced that myself before. When you ran dry, you passed out and didn't wake for half a day, or even a whole day in some cases. Persenna was no exception. She must have passed out, and by the time she awoke, it was her turn for guard duty. From the sounds of things, she went straight to work without eating or drinking a thing. Couldn't you guys have fed her or something?
The rules are the rules.
During the rainy season, any snacking or eating outside regular mealtimes was prohibited. They kept strict tabs on their provisions to ensure they didn't run out before the 3-month period was over.
What about letting her skip out on duty for the day?
So many monsters attacked the day before that a good portion of our warriors were still bedridden. We didn't have enough people, as much as we would have liked to let her rest. Even she herself said, "It's just a little hunger, nothing serious."
It made sense. She probably felt a sense of duty as the future matriarch. That was admirable. She'd be a shining example to my past lazy self who tried every excuse in the book to skip out on his obligations. And that's what led to the incident.
Correct. I keep thinking, if only I had found her something to eat back then, this might never have happened.
The circumstances seem to warrant an exception in this case for Persenna's offense, but that would be difficult since the suspect in question still steadfastly claimed she hadn't done it. Watson, no Linnea, what do you think, having heard all of that? I figured it was worth asking my assistant since she was Persenna's friend after all.
I thought she was guilty from the start. Mew. She's always had the habit of swiping anything available and devouring it when her stomach's empty. Mew. She's even eaten some of my dried fish before, you know.
So she already has a prior offense on her record. Having heard what everyone had to say, I noticed there was only one witness
whose statements seemed inconsistent. Someone had to be lying. But who could it be? Correct, it was Persina. She was the only one who hadn't admitted to her own actions, claiming someone had punched her from behind. I returned to the jail to question her about it once more. Persina, are you absolutely certain you aren't guilty? Look me in the eyes and tell me.
I mean it, boss. Believe me.
She gazed directly at me, eyes glimmering and hands clasped in front of her. The one thing that seemed suspicious was the way her tail wagged. Time to trick her into telling the truth. If I advocate for you, there's a good chance I can get you out of here.
I knew you could do it, boss.
But if you do leave this cell and I discover you are lying, I won't let you eat meat for a whole year.
Oh. Well, of course I'm not lying.
Can you swear to God?
I can.
Her eyes darted back and forth nervously. I knew something was fishy. That's a guilty look if I've ever seen one. Just so you're aware, I show no mercy to those who blaspheme my God. Can you truly swear to God? Persina was fully aware of the person I revered so greatly. Her face went deathly pale and her entire body began to tremble. She curled her tail between her legs and grabbed the tip of it with both hands. Well?
It was me. I did it.
And with that, the case was solved. The culprit was, as everyone expected, Persina Adaldia. She laid the blame on an unidentified third party because she didn't want to admit responsibility. Sneaky. Mushoku Tensei Volume 18 by Rifujine Magonote. Cast by Artel Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit www.artel.ai and use promotion code ARTEL to activate your account. Now, enjoy the story. Little devil, although she was bewitched by the meat, so perhaps she was a victim herself in a way. Mr. Geis, I apologize for the extra trouble.
It's fine. More importantly, are you sure you're all right with Persena?
He'd watched the whole thing play out with an exasperated look, but now that everything was resolved, he seemed eager about something I couldn't place. All right with Persena, for what?
I'm speaking, of course, about the other warrior you plan to take with you to look after the sacred beast.
What? Hold up here. I never said a word about wanting Persena to fill that role. He seemed way too excited about the prospect of me taking Persena, although I guess I had brought her up in the first place. It made sense that he'd gotten the wrong idea.
Are you truly sure you want her?
No, I don't. Of course I didn't want her. I'd be suspected of cheating once again if I let her into our house on a daily basis. Sylphie and Roxy had both given me beautiful baby girls, and I didn't want to screw up my whole family because of this idiot. I could already picture her gobbling up all our meat, and how bitter Aisha and Lilia would be afterward. The only person who'd welcome her with open arms would be Eris. In any case, it would be better to have someone more serious, who wouldn't get me accused of two-timing. Gimmel, for instance.
I see. So you would prefer someone else. Then will you be going with Minitona or Tersena?
No, those two are also candidates to become matriarch, right? There must be someone else. We started toward the exit as we discussed our options.
Oh, wait! Don't leave me here, boss! Get me out! I want you to take me with you. I don't want to live a life without meat.
We both ignored the voice shouting after us.
Mew!
Lamia cackled as she slipped through the door, having waited outside this whole time. It seemed she'd been thrown in here naked before, and going in would only make her relive that shame. That was why she'd vehemently refused to accompany me at first.
Hiya, Persina. I see you got your just desserts, Mew. Linnea! I thought I caught a whiff of your set. What are you doing here?
For some reason, Linnea was sporting a pair of sunglasses. They were the same ones she'd worn while she was working, the ones that hid the way her eyes turned into dollar signs as she counted her money.
Why, you ask? You really don't know, Mew.
Linnea grabbed my arm and pressed her breasts against it. Knock that off already. Erg, I can already smell you going into heat.
Dee, don't tell me that you and Boss are...
Priscina's nose twitched as she sniffed the air and her lips trembled.
You got it. That reminds Mew of the passionate night we spent together. Boss picked me up and carried me, like a princess in his arms. Oh no, I can't share any more than that, Mew. Just know that Boss made me weep that day. That can't be. Boss said it'd be doing dirty by Fitz and Roxy, so he wouldn't even give us the time of day. Mew, don't you think the only reason he never paid you any attention is because you weren't attractive enough? The second it was just him and Meow, he couldn't get enough. Man, I tell ya, the noble blood of the Grey Rats flows strong in his veins. Our first night together was so rough I thought he might break one of my ribs. Mew. Break one of your ribs? Just how rough was the sex you were having?
She was probably referring the first night she spent with Eris. Eris had a habit of practically squeezing her bedmate to death in her sleep. I'd fallen victim to that before. So had Leo and apparently Linnea. The next morning, Linnea was on the verge of tears as she had Sylphie heal her wounds. She wasn't lying about the details, at least.
Linnea, you're Boss's wife now. Nah, not his wife. Exactly, Mew. But basically, I'm like his slave. Mew. His slave?
Priscina's face went bright red as she slapped her hands over her mouth. Well, the slave part wasn't a lie either.
You could say I've carved out a pretty good spot for myself, Mew. I may be his slave, but he lets me work, and I've got 50 subordinates under Meow. Unlike you, I'll never be thrown in jail, and I get to enjoy Boss's affections. Oh, but I gotta admit it would be way more grand to be the Duld's matriarch, Mew. But you seem to be out of the running for that, Moo-ha.
Her obnoxious laughter filled the room.
Linnea, it's not fair. That day I really was so busy I couldn't find time to eat a single bite the whole day. I didn't even eat that much from the storehouse, only what I'd eat during any normal meal. We could replenish that much by killing and drying out another beast.
Linnea finally peeled herself from me.
That felt good, Mew.
She did look truly satisfied. What a terrible person. That said, I did think that Priscina's exceptional circumstances deserved some consideration. The monster attack had gone on from midnight until early morning. Whoever was on guard duty at the time was responsible for the number of injuries. As far as I was concerned, their misstep had shifted the burden onto Priscina as one of the tribe's healers. Once all the monsters were dealt with, she'd worked tirelessly to heal people, which was probably why so many were saved. But in the end, she collapsed, having spent all her mana. They gave her no time to eat when she finally woke up and was sent straight to guard duty. What she'd gone through would have been rough on anyone. There were some parts of the situation that really no one could be faulted for. Granted, she did steal food. Even though she'd been assigned to guard duty after not eating for an entire day, that wasn't an excuse to swipe food. Back in Japan, if a police officer was discovered to have committed a crime, they were immediately removed from duty. She was due some consideration for her circumstances, but a crime was still a crime. She had defied one of the village's rules. She couldn't very well complain that she was no longer in the running for warrior chief or matriarch.
Hey, Boss, Dad, I have a favor to ask. Mew.
She lowered her entire upper body in the perfect 45-degree bow.
I would like you to appoint Priscina to look after the sacred beast, Mew.
When she lifted her face again, she stared right at us with determination in her eyes. I stood up a little straighter, ready to hear her out.
The two of us went to those far-off foreign lands so we could become the best we could be as potential future matriarchs. Mew, I'm confident we put in more effort than anyone else. We'd never have become head of the class otherwise, Mew. When I lost to Priscina at the very end, I gave up and let her walk the path of our people. But I only did it because I thought she'd make a great matriarch. Mew, I don't think it's fair for her to have to start back at square one for a single mistake. I want you to give her a chance, Mew. If she's able to look after the sacred beast for the next 5 years? No. Make that 10. Like she's supposed to and fulfills the role assigned to her. Then let her come back here for her crime, Mew. I won't ask yet to make her the matriarch, but I'd like her to at least have a similarly respectable position, Mew.
Her request wasn't the least bit logical. Linnea had herself abandon her duties to become a merchant. She had no right to make a request like this. Besides, this crime was a result of Prasenna's lack of self-control. I could admit she deserved some leniency because of the exceptional circumstances. Truly, I did, but a crime was still a crime. It was too much to ask for complete forgiveness, simply because she'd worked hard up till this point. That wasn't a valid reason.
I cannot do that.
Mistakes you had made in the past didn't simply disappear, and you couldn't erase them either. That was how the world worked. I knew that as well as anyone. Still, I wanted her efforts to be rewarded somehow. Persina had worked her hardest. She earnestly attended her classes, snacking on meat the whole while. We took healing classes together, so I knew how dedicated she was. In my mind, there was no question that she'd worked twice as hard as most people. That was how she topped her class, despite most beastfolk lacking an affinity for magic. I wanted all of that to pay off for her. I honestly did, mostly because I empathized with her. If I worked hard at something, I'd want it to bear fruit for me, too. And if I were in a position to help someone be rewarded, I wanted to do my utmost in that respect. Mr. Guess, I hope you don't mind, but I'd also like to ask you to agree to Linnea's request.
Boss, you mean it?
Guess pulled a face, dipping his chin as he contemplated my request. After a moment, he finally raised his head again and said,
Very well. I'll allow it.
The guys I used to know would have stubbornly said no until the end. Taking care of the sacred beast seemed like an exceedingly prestigious duty, and not something you'd entrust to a criminal who'd stolen food before. To not only let Persina have that honor, but to wipe her slate clean too? It was foolish. The only one who benefited from this was Persina, and enormously too. Honestly, I wasn't even sure my judgment on this matter was correct. I was probably making a mistake, but that was exactly why I acknowledged I was being selfish. Linnea, Persina, you'd best make sure to fulfill your duties properly. Understood?
Yes, sir. Mew.
You got it!
The two girls bowed their heads at the same time. As I watched them, I found myself thinking, these two really are at their best when they're together. We used the raft to return the way we came, heading toward the Holy Sword Highway. When we found the monument to the 7 great powers, I figured it was as good a time as any and pulled out my flute. I managed to summon Aromafi, who led us back to the floating fortress.
This place sure brings back memories. Never thought I'd come back to the city I once ruled before.
Yes, she had indeed come back to the very place she might call her second home.
Oh, Persina, there is one teeny thing I forgot to mention. Mew.
What is it? I'm kind of getting sentimental over here, so I'd appreciate it if you kept whatever you want to say short.
Well, I did help you out. So for a while, you're going to be my underling, got it?
And that was how Prasenna became Linnea's lackey. Chapter 10, The Other Slave, Part 1. Several days had passed since the gruesome incident I'd named the jerky murder. Persina returned to Sharia with us, and Eris was more than happy to dote on her. She also joined the ranks of our mercenary band, but that's a whole other story. Today, I was working with Zanoba as usual, trying to improve my magic armor. We were making some minor adjustments to version 2 while developing a more powerful version 3 and version 4. I had a whole mountain of ideas, but the majority were either impossible or next to impossible to bring to fruition. Our development was slow to progress, but I enjoyed the process of working with someone and making baby steps toward our goal. Today was no different. Zanoba and I sat opposite one another, studying the blueprints spread out in front of us.
It seems like Julie is hiding something from me.
Really? Julie, of all people?
Yes, she's doing something in secret behind my back.
Huh. It was rare for him to worry about anything other than dolls and figures, but it was especially strange for Julie to be weighing on his mind. Perhaps she'd grown on him since they'd lived together for so long now. So, what do you mean by in secret?
Lately, she's been going to the market by herself. Even if I ask her what she bought, she won't answer me. In fact, she won't even show me the figure she's supposed to be working on. It's like she's making something else without my knowledge. I have tried asking her what she's doing, but all she does is brush me off.
Well, she is getting to be that age. Maybe this is just a phase. Julie'd had her first period not too long ago, and physical changes often brought about mental changes. In short, Julie was entering puberty. She'd known Zenoba since she was very young, but he was still a man. It wasn't strange for her to be embarrassed about him discovering her secrets. Like, for instance, the color of her underwear, that kind of stuff.
What do you suppose I should do?
I don't see any option but to leave her to her own devices. Everyone went through puberty at some point. It was a normal part of life, the period where a person gradually transformed from a child to an adult. Changes always had a ripple effect, which meant those around them had to change how they treated the person who was maturing. You had to start treating them as more of an adult or risk driving them to rebel. Having said that, Zenoba needed time to figure out how to interact with her. There was no fixed script for how to deal with people. It was something you had to learn over time.
Since she's a slave, forcing her to answer would be an option, I'm sure, but...
You plan to make her tell you?
No. She may live with me now, but she actually belongs to you, Master. I don't have the authority to do that, though I would not oppose your decision if you requested it of me.
There was hesitation in manner even as he said that. Calling her my slave was just an excuse. Even if she belonged to him, he had no intention of forcing her to obey him. I couldn't blame him for that. I was no different. As long as it's nothing bad and isn't causing problems, I don't see the harm in leaving her be. Do you?
Oh, I actually do consider it a substantial problem that she won't share the figurine she's finished.
I guess I can see where you're coming from. In that case, why not ask Miss Ginger to try talking to her? If it was something Julie didn't feel comfortable sharing with a man, perhaps she would be more open to sharing with a woman. She was a young girl entering puberty, so it was probably hard for her to discuss certain things with the opposite sex. That was what I assumed, anyway.
That is a splendid idea. Surely Ginger will be able to handle the matter smoothly.
It was hard to believe Julie was already entering puberty. Time sure went by quickly. It probably wouldn't be long before my little Lucy hit the same stage in her life. She'd been growing more used to me lately, and a fond father-daughter relationship was beginning to bloom between us. Alas, I was sure the day would come when she'd go back to being fussy and obstinate, saying things like, "I don't want you to wash my underwear with Daddy's, and I hate getting in the bath after Daddy. It's disgusting. Just imagining it made my stomach knot. I promise I won't force you to get in the bath with me, so please at least be willing to sit at the same dinner table."
By the way, Master, there's another topic I'd like to broach with you.
Oh?
Do you have any interest in boxes?
Boxes? Was he referring to a sweatbox? As in, a club? A sweatbox might refer instead to a place where lots of people gathered, from what I understood of the young people's slang. Since I had a mercenary band and thus plenty of opportunities for large gatherings, it might be worth looking into. Sure, I was interested. Wait, there's no way that's what he means. This is Zenoba we're talking about. It's probably a treasure box or something like that. Yeah, that was more likely. There were probably lots of those boxes out there encrusted with gems and the like. I'd seen ones like that at Perugius's place, and they were the very definition of luxury. They were empty, though.
Yes, actually, I found a wonderful craftsman. I would like you to see their wares as well.
To be perfectly frank, I wasn't really interested. On the other hand, it was rare for Zenoba to invite me to see an artisan like this. What kind of boxes?
Ones with the most incredible designs. I have seen ones of this caliber before. Actually, oh, no. It would be better to see them with your own eyes rather than have me explain.
I had Zenoba pegged for a guy who only loved figures and nothing else, but it seemed he had a discerning eye when it came to other kinds of craft as well. For someone as picky as him to shower anything in praise made me deeply curious. In that case, I guess I'll check it out.
I knew you would say that, Master.
The shop in question was tucked deep in the artisan quarter. I lost track of how many blocks we passed on the way. Far fewer people traversed the artisan quarter than the commerce district, and the buildings were quaint, lacking any distinguishing characteristics. On top of that, you could easily get lost in the winding streets. Despite the quietness of the streets, there were still quite a few people milling around. It was mostly fussy artisans who went about with permanent frowns etched on their faces as if they'd forgotten how to smile. If I were a young child, I'd probably take one look at the people around here and start sobbing.
Zenoba walked with purpose, wasting no time. When we came to forks in the street, he knew exactly where to turn. We went down a short flight of stairs, then clambered up a much larger set. We passed through streets decorated with clotheslines and cut right past a workshop, producing strange purple smoke. Finally, we arrived. The store was the size of a small civilian house. It wasn't grand, and there was no sign out front either. A thin trail of smoke rose from its chimney, indicating someone was in, but most people would never guess that this was a shop.
This is it.
There was barely any light inside. In fact, the only sources of illumination were the streams of sunlight that came in through the window. A few undecorated display cases formed haphazard lines, blocking most of the light from the room. Still, there was enough to see what merchandise they held. The top shelves had female dolls in fancy outfits. They were similar to porcelain dolls, but made of wood instead. These dolls were tucked in lavishly decorated wooden boxes, all neatly arranged in rows. These dolls and the boxes that contained them were extremely elaborate, which stood in stark contrast to the shop's general atmosphere and the simple design of the display cases themselves.
These must be the boxes Zenoba was talking about.
What do you think, Master?
Now I see what you were talking about. These really are nice boxes.
I knew you would agree.
Honestly, the boxes were far more finely constructed than the dolls were. The craftsman had matched the lumber of the boxes to each doll's design before carefully chiseling them down and decorating them with jewels and lining them with expensive cloth. Each box almost looked like an intricate bed for its respective doll. Of course, no two boxes were the same. They were all made to order. My only criticism was that the dolls looked so inorganic compared to the organic vibe of the boxes they were contained in. In fact, my figures would look far better nestled in those boxes, amplifying their charm. I got the sense that the creator valued the quality of their boxes more than the dolls themselves. Huh? Zenoba, what are these names? I looked a little closer and noticed small letters names etched on the boxes. Layla, Abby, Sophia, Clara, Francine, Natalie.
Those are the dolls' names.
Oh, okay. I'd never name my figurines like that, primarily because they were based on actual people. That said, in my previous world, many people named their porcelain dolls or teddy bears. Naming objects like that usually meant people remained attached to them for far longer. Although the dolls were less stunning than the boxes that contained them, surely it wasn't because the artisan loved the boxes more. After all, would a parent love their children less simply because they were ugly? Just so we're clear, my own daughters were as beautiful and lovable as the finest gems.
Allow me to introduce you to the creator.
He slipped between the rows of dolls and headed further inside the shop. I hurried after him, passing the display cases into an area with a slightly different atmosphere. This room only had one window, and light from it poured directly across a large workbench. A number of tools were scattered upon it ones. I was quite familiar with myself. Wood, glue, wooden dowels, a stiff bristle brush, a painting brush, a file, a scraper, a carving knife, and a chisel. They were all things one would use when making a doll. This store clearly doubled as a workshop. A man sat at the workbench with his back to us, focused intently on whatever he was crafting. Once Zenoba realized the man hadn't noticed us, he reached for a bell sitting nearby and rang it thrice. The man's shoulders jumped when he heard it.
Who's there?
The man was as tall as Zenoba, with a sharp gaze, hollowed cheeks, frazzled hair, and calloused hands. His eyes widened as he scanned the area, looking for the culprit who'd rung his bell. When he spotted a familiar face, his lips curved and his voice went up several decibels as well as octaves.
Well, well, look we have here. If it isn't Master Zenoba.
That's right! I'm back again, Master Belfried.
You are always more than welcome. What brings you here today?
His voice boomed through the room, and it somehow suited the man. I was more surprised by how friendly the two were. Perhaps they were brothers in a past life or something.
I came back to introduce my master to you. I spoke to you about him before, if you'll remember.
Oh, him! The man responsible for those beautiful girls, yes!
Precisely. Master, this is the owner of this workshop, Master Belfried. He is the talented artisan responsible for the number of excellent boxes, or rather, doll beds you saw decorating the shop.
His voice was infused with more respect than usual as he showered the man with compliments. Sure must feel nice to get an introduction as fancy as that.
And Master Belfried, this here is my master, the great and powerful magician Rudeus Greyrat. He is himself an eminent craftsman whose figures no other person alive could possibly mimic, the kind of rare talent that will likely be spoken of for many decades after his death.
His words overflowed with such reverence as he introduced me that it was overkill and actually made me pretty uncomfortable. I didn't really care how people would speak of me after I was dead. They'd probably only badmouth me as a lady killer who kept numerous wives.
I have heard so many rumors about you. You are not merely a top-tier magician, but you also a deeply learned craftsman as well.
I assure you, compared to Zenoba, I'm pretty ignorant about this stuff.
Oh, you are too modest.
I didn't want them to put me on this huge pedestal. Truly, I was a complete amateur compared to Zenoba and Perugius, who were far more earnestly devoted to the fine arts. I merely had the knowledge about figures I'd brought from my previous life, but even that was shallow at best. At any rate, those boxes were absolutely fantastic. Even at just a glance,
They're beds. That's where my daughters sleep. Please, I would ask you to refer to them as beds.
Huh. He was sure particular about that. Right, beds, then. I understand. They are such fine craftsmanship that bed does seem the more fitting term for them.
I am of the mind to ask you to collaborate with me at some point, so I would ask you to be mindful about how you speak of my girls' beds in the future.
All right. Well, I could do that if that's all he wanted. I glanced at Zenoba, who looked particularly apologetic. Judging by the way he spoke, he must have similarly invoked Belfried's anger this way. Still, I was pretty sure he'd referred to them as boxes when he'd spoken to me. Belfried seemed a little fussy, but his craftsmanship and attention to detail with these beds was top-notch. Zenoba was right about one thing. We might really want to collaborate with this man in due time. Just as one preferred to put their expensive paintings in similar quality frames, it was best to put extravagant figures in boxes that suited them. We had no need for such boxes in our plans for the Ruijed figure, but perhaps we might find a use for them on a different occasion. For instance, if we presented a gift to Perugius or wanted to sell something to Ashuran nobility, there were plenty of ways his skills might come in handy.
Master Belfried, I realize you may be an exceedingly talented artisan, but the impudence you showed my master is...
It's fine, Zenoba. I see nothing wrong with his request. It's important to be particular about certain things. Zenoba frowned as if not entirely convinced, but Belfried really did seem to consider his boxes as beds for his dolls. He made them with the desire to give his dolls a comfortable, serene place to sleep, and it was those feelings that propelled him to perfect his craft to this quality.
Speaking of collaboration, that little figure maker of yours came to the shop the other day.
Figure maker?
Julie did?
Ah, so that's who he was referring to. I couldn't shake my mental image of her as an inexperienced amateur, which was why it felt so strange hearing Belfried refer to her like some kind of professional crafter. It was true, however, that her skills had grown immensely. Aside from the use of magic, her skills had far surpassed mine. She was likely a fine maker of figures by the standards of this world.
That's odd. I haven't asked Julie to purchase anything.
I must tell you, Miss Julie, I can hardly express it.
Belfried continued rambling, completely ignoring Zanoba's reaction. For whatever reason, he seemed extremely enthusiastic. Don't tell me this guy is a true-born Malakan who somehow witnessed Julie doing something perverted. I mean, the two of us might have something in common then, but I definitely don't want him coming anywhere near my daughters in that case.
What did Julie do?
The words, I'm afraid I cannot even find the right ones to express what happened.
Zanoba and I exchanged glances. Let me try asking. Don't worry, you can leave this to me. I may not look it, but as the face of our company, I've recently dipped my toes into the business of extracting information from people. I even handled an interrogation to discover the true criminal behind a robbery. Please, calm down and explain yourself. What exactly did Julie come here for?
A figure? She brought a figure with her.
A figure? He wasn't exactly answering my question, but I was willing to let that slide for now.
Yes, it was one I had never seen before in my life. It was incredible, absolutely, positively incredible. A masterpiece.
Once again, Zanoba and I exchanged looks. Julie had shown us every single piece she had made. Zanoba had safely tucked most of them away in his storehouse. She would need his permission to take one out. However, Zanoba had mentioned that she wouldn't let him see her most recent work.
I can't stop myself from trembling just thinking about it, see? My hands are shaking because the joy is so overwhelming.
Belfried held his hands out for us to see, and they were exactly as he described, though I personally sensed something far more sinister than joy.
And so I thought to myself, I need to pour these feelings, this affection, this delight into my own craftsmanship. Have a look for yourself.
Belfried scurried back over to his table and grabbed something before returning to us. He was cradling a box in his hands. No, not a box. I need to call it a bed while I'm here in this shop. It was white with gold decorations. The fabric lining it was a luxurious light pink that complemented the rest of the colors perfectly. Although it lacked gems, unlike the others I'd seen, that simplicity only added to its elegance. It almost reminded me of a palace canopy bed.
This is the bed I made for her. I can count the number of times I have felt this creatively inspired before. That's how impactful it was. This is the first time I've ever been able to create such a fantastic bed in only a few days' time.
It was impressively well made, there was no doubt about that. I'd seen a lot of stunning works of art from all over, which was why I instantly recognized this as a rare gem. It was a step above the specimens in the display cases, with craftsmanship fit for a king. Even Perugius would likely recognize its quality.
Oh, Master Zanoba, I cannot believe you would tease me like that, having your little doll maker show off a work of that caliber.
But I'm afraid I'm completely in the dark myself.
I was a little lost, but I guessed that Julie had brought a figure here. It was so impressive that it drove Belfried to make a bed for it by his own choosing. That was what I had gathered. The problem was that Zanoba had no memory of ordering Julie to do such a thing. That had to mean she'd done it of her own volition. But why? Why did Julie bring that figure here? Did she say anything?
I haven't the faintest idea. I got so excited the moment I saw the figure that I didn't hear what she'd brought it in for. Though most people bring their adorable daughters here because they want to give them a bed where they can sleep peacefully. Perhaps that was her intention?
Huh. I had a hard time believing there were so many people wanting a bed for their doll. That was so niche that only customers with that specific interest would probably ever come to the shop. Could Julie be one of them?
When one marries off one of their daughters, their betrothed will be much happier having a bed to put them in.
Marry off? Betrothed? I blinked at him. Oh, I get it. In other words, having a box to put a doll in raised its value when selling it. That made sense.
Precisely. That was why I was hoping this one might marry into my home. I tried to purchase her for 200 Asuran gold coins. But unfortunately, your doll maker ran from me.
200 Asuran gold coins?
Oh, Master Rudius, please don't give me that look. You must think the worst of me trying to buy a piece of such quality for a measly 200 coins, but I swear to you that was all I had on my person at the time. I now have 300 to offer. No, no. I'm willing to go as far as 350.
What shocked me was that a figure would fetch such a high price in the first place. But did this mean Julie was trying to sell it? But why would she try to sell it?
Why not? The more money, the better. No, you can never have too much.
I'm more curious about what she'd use it for. She's never needed for anything up until now, at least not as far as I've heard. I glanced at Zenoba. It was possible that Zenoba had failed to provide something for her, which led to her needing money herself. If, for instance, Zenoba was suddenly drowning in insane debt like someone else I knew.
Lately, her skills have improved immensely, so I've been giving her a generous.
I had been the one who came up with the idea of paying her. Zenoba had been shocked at the concept of giving money to a slave, but he didn't quibble about it. Julie was working hard enough that she deserved that much. It was only natural to pay her.
Yes, that's right. Master Julie is a slave, isn't she? In that case, perhaps she's trying to buy her freedom?
Her freedom?
Indeed.
Slaves were generally bought and sold for coin purchased one place, then auctioned off somewhere else. Their individual rights differed based on the country they were in and who owned them. There were some countries that prioritized proper treatment of slaves and others that were far less concerned about that. It was rather easy to become a slave. If you didn't have any money, then you could visit a slaver and sell yourself off. There were many people who'd rather be someone else's belonging than die. That was especially true in the Northern Territories. On top of its difficult climate, the people living here were mostly impoverished. If one couldn't find some kind of job, they risked starvation or death by hypothermia. On top of that, it was actually fairly easy to quit, at least in theory. Since a slave was sold for money, they could also be bought with money. One could save up the coin to purchase themselves and be free after that. The amount required depended on a number of factors: the country of residence, how many years the slave had been kept, and how much money had been spent on said slave. There were even some nations where slaves weren't allowed to have wages. We had bought Julie for a ridiculously low price. Although we had taught her a number of different skills, she could easily buy her freedom with 200 Asuran gold coins and still have some cash left over. Not that we really wanted to let her go, mind you. And there was something more important that bothered me.
I cannot believe she would do such a thing without speaking to me first.
Zenoba dropped his gaze, a shadow falling over his face, which made it difficult to make out his features. I could understand his shock, though. We had done the best we could for Julie. She was in a horrific state when we bought her, but we gave her food, clothes, a warm place to sleep, educated her, and taught her practical skills. We even gave her a wage. We bought her for a specific reason. Zenoba, being a blessed child, couldn't create the art he wanted himself. I also wanted to mass-produce Ruya-Jerd figures in the future. We'd been pretty strict with Julie, hoping to eventually fulfill those goals, but we'd never been cruel to her. Of course, if Julie really wanted to be free, we would release her. That didn't lessen the shock of finding out she was going behind our backs to get the funds to do so, though. It was like she didn't trust us at all. No. Being a slave was no walk in the park. I had never been a slave before, so it wasn't right for me to belittle the struggles they faced. Having seen Linmia's predicament for myself, it was much easier for me to imagine what some of them went through. Anyone would be stressed out by not having true personal freedom. They couldn't really say what was on their mind or do the things they wanted to do. I thought we'd done right by her, but I guess maybe it was too hard on her being a slave this whole time. She had only recently started the transition to adulthood. Perhaps that had led her to contemplate her future more seriously. No doubt she found herself faced with a number of worries. Was it really okay to keep making figures as she had been? What would happen in her future? It was also possible she'd grown fearful of being a grown man's slave now that her body had started to mature, regardless of how much of a gentleman Zenoba was. Given their master-servant relationship, Zenoba showed little hesitation over stripping her, much like he had during Period Scare not long ago. Julie might still be young, but that still had to be embarrassing and scary for her.
But if that's the case, what will happen to our dreams? You have paid no small sum yourself to help raise her, haven't you, Master?
The amount I had contributed was nothing compared to Zenoba's investments. In fact, I was a little worried, thinking about just how much he had poured into her development. It wasn't just gold, it was time and effort. Whatever the case, Julie is a person like anyone else. If she's that eager to free herself, then I don't feel like it's our place to stop her. Zenoba grunted and crossed his arms over his chest, still anxious. He continued to groan quietly for a while after that. It was probably difficult for him to come to terms with it. Despite my stance on letting her go, it wouldn't be easy for him to give up on his dolls and figures, hence the intense contemplation. Well, how should I go about convincing him then? Thanks to the Zalith gauntlet, he had the fine motor control to not crush things now, and even if he did release Julie, he could perhaps still commission her to do work for him. Those would probably be the best arguments. Zenoba finally turned toward me, as if he'd reached his decision.
You are right. Julie has worked hard under our care. Perhaps the least we can do is grant whatever wish she has.
That was a little unexpected. Knowing Zenoba, I figured he would refuse to back down. After all, this meant losing the person who had been doing her utmost to make figures for him every day. I guess that even with his strong penchant for dolls, he couldn't treat her like a machine after living with her for so long. He'd even given her a name similar to his little brother's. Well, let's go back for now. We should ask Julie what her intentions really are. At this point, we were only jumping to conclusions. The most important thing was what Julie wanted. If she'd really intended to free herself without saying a word to Zenoba, though, I would have to give her a good talking to. I understood that wasn't an easy topic to bring up, but some things needed to be communicated. And thus we returned to Zenoba's dorm room. It was 10 minutes by carriage, and for reasons beyond my imagination, Belfried decided to accompany us. I want to see that figure one more time, he'd said. I wasn't buying it. His pockets jingled and jangled, filled with coins, which was a clear indication he hadn't given up on his desire to purchase the figure from Julie. I had a hard time believing Zenoba would willingly part with it if it really was as phenomenal as Belfried claimed. Though I guess Zenoba might not share Belfried's profuse adoration for it. Everyone had their own likes and dislikes after all. Still, it was good that Belfried intended to negotiate for what he wanted. He seemed like quite the eccentric, but he was at least a proper merchant.
I have returned.
On the inside, it was the same as I remembered. Zenoba's lover, the bronze statue of a nude woman, was nowhere to be seen. And of course, neither Julie nor Ginger were in the midst of changing when we strolled in. Actually, Julie was conspicuously absent.
Welcome back, Master.
Julie came dashing out from one of the inner rooms. Scratch that then. I guess she is here. She had a steel knife in her hand used for chiseling stone. Apparently, she wasn't using the workbench in the main room and had instead been practicing her craft elsewhere, or perhaps hiding it, as the case might be. Zenoba must have realized the same thing. Julie showed no signs of being panicked by our abrupt return, however. She actually seemed more delighted than I'd seen her before. If she was really plotting to buy her freedom and make her escape behind Zenoba's back, then being able to smile this innocently was some impressive acting. Also very unsettling. All I can say is, women sure can be scary sometimes. All I can say is, women sure can be scaries.
Oh!
Her face clouded over the moment she spotted Belfry, and she retreated a step as if panicked. Ho? What's this? Did she see Belfried and realize that someone privy to her secret was now here?
Hey there, Julie. Thank you for coming by the other day.
A shudder ran through Julie, and she shot an entreating look at Zenoba, begging for help. Zenoba hummed under his breath and started toward her. He crossed the gap between them in no time, and he stared down at her. Julie glanced anxiously at him, waiting.
Julie, do wish to stop being my slave?
Her eyes shot wide open. Chapter 11, The Other Slave, Part 2. Half of Juliet's life had been stained with despair. She was born to a dwarven couple and literally given the name, the child of Bizarre of the Holy Steel and Little Etta of the beautiful Snow Ridge. and dwarven custom children were not given names until they reached 7 years of age, so there was nothing strange about her not having one of her own. Back then, Juliet's parents referred to her as our baby or our beloved girl, and she thought nothing strange of it. But enough of that. Let's talk about Bizarre and Lilitella. They were a little different from other dwarves. Most dwarves lived on the Millis continent, in the southern part of the Great Forest along the foot of the mountains. They spent their time mining ore and using it to craft weapons, which were used for hunting or sold to buy food. They were a rather simple race in that way. Julie's parents, however, made their lot by traveling the world and crafting weapons and adornments in each region they visited using whatever materials they found there. Julie didn't know the reason they decided to leave their homeland to become nomads. Perhaps they had a good reason, or perhaps it was merely youthful indulgence that led them to venture away from their country of origin. Whatever the case, one thing was readily apparent. The life they had chosen wasn't an easy one. Worse, they were already on the brink of bankruptcy when Julie was born. They dug themselves into further debt paying back debts they owed, and no matter how much they worked, they weren't earning enough to keep up with the interest. Their debt only grew and grew. It wasn't that her parents' craftsmanship was lacking, they just didn't have the business acumen or foresight to make proper use of their talents. They thought that if they made a good quality product, people would be willing to buy it, which was why they took out loans for top quality materials far beyond their means and tried to sell the products. The issue was, very few people would stop by a roadside shop to purchase something that exorbitant. It took the couple too long to sell their wares, and they sank deeper and deeper into the red. In the meantime, thanks to the interest on the debts. When they got lucky, they would break even, until you figured in living expenses, and then it was back to being in the red. It was honestly impressive how the two managed to live like that for so many years. They only managed because they'd figured out how to be self-sufficient. At times, they even resorted to cunning means to keep afloat, such as defaulting on smaller debts by skipping town to the next country. For several years, the couple were desperate to scrape together a living, and there was definitely nothing enjoyable about it for them. Julie's earliest memory was of her lying in bed and watching her parents hunched over, their backs turned to her as they worked on crafting something. They had their foreheads nearly pressed together as they fiddled with something in their hands. A cool breeze came through a crack in the room and caressed Julie's cheek. She cried out, and Lilitella smiled reluctantly as she hurried over and cradled her daughter in her arms, trying to comfort her. The way they looked was engraved in Julie's mind even now, the tears threatening to well in Lilitella's eyes, and the dark, guilty look on Bizarre's face. Julie couldn't recall ever seeing them smile, not truly. A few years later, her parents finally crumpled under their debts. They had skipped out on so many repayments that the loan sharks had all started putting them on blacklists, making it impossible for them to borrow anymore. Without the means to buy the materials they needed, they had no way of eking out a living as it was winter in the Northern Territories by that point. Their only choices were to die as a family or find a way to live on as slaves. With no other options readily apparent, they chose the latter. Despite their tough circumstances, Bizarre and Lilitella were probably more fortunate than most. Dwarves had strong constitutions, and since Bizarre was such a skilled smith, he found a buyer quickly. Lilitella did not have much of a longer wait. She was skilled with her hands, could create beautiful adornments and repair various objects and clothing, and she had experience looking after children. Neither of them would die, even if they were ripped apart from one another. There were still people out there who needed their skills. Except for Julie, of course, who was the most misfortunate of their family. She was too young to be of much use. She could hardly even speak at her age. She filled no one's needs, and so there were no buyers to take her. Day after day, she stood at the edge of the slave market, staring down at her feet. Even the slavers were growing troubled over what to do with her. Slaves were still people like anyone else, which meant the slavers had to feed them, give them a warm place to sleep, and make sure they stayed healthy. The one lucky thing was that Bizarre and his wife had managed to sell themselves to the slaver Fabrito, who was one of the bigger slavers in the trade. He had secured himself a prominent spot in the market, and he had a reputation for quality merchandise. That was why they kept Julie and looked after her, even though she had failed to attract any buyers, instead of abandoning her on the side of some road. That was where her luck ended, though. Even Fabrito didn't have the luxury of caring about what he considered defective goods in his warehouse. His treatment of Julie gradually grew sloppier until he gave up on dragging her out to the sales floor altogether. Despite how young she was, Julie knew no one needed her. She also knew that her parents had abandoned her. Worse, she knew that she would probably suffer from the cold and starvation in that cage until the sweet embrace of death finally took her. Julie wasn't particularly bothered by the idea of her life ending. None of her memories were of anything good. She was born into poverty and spent her whole life with an ache in her belly. Her meals consisted of soups with bitter grass and old meat on the verge of rotting. She tried her best not to get in her parents' way, loitering in corners and spacing out the whole time. Every day was as bland and meaningless as the last. The only decent memory she had was of a time when her parents managed to sell one of their works for decent coin. Her father let her have a little sip of alcohol at the time. It was an atrocious grog, mixed with all sorts of things, but as a dwarf tasting liquor for the first time, Julie thought it was absolutely delicious. Julie had no desire to live. She didn't dream of finding happiness for herself. She had no idea how that might even happen. That was why, when those two men appeared before her, she couldn't picture anything good coming from it. In fact, she was positive something new and awful was on the horizon. Do you not want to live anymore? Yes, that's exactly it, she thought at the time. I want to die. If it's that bad, should I just end it for you? A part of her felt relieved. Finally, it will be all over. No more cold, no more ravenous hunger. Her dark life would come to an end. The man asking her this question had a blank expression. He was so utterly unreadable that she got the impression he really meant it, that if she nodded, he'd take her life as easily and quickly as he breathed. His eyes were far too serious for it to be a joke, but the more she studied them, the more something strange bubbled up inside her. It was almost like he was really trying to say, "You have enough life left in you to give this another shot, don't you?" Of course, if he actually said so, she would have probably shaken her head and insisted she couldn't go on. But he spoke not a word, silently staring back at her. It wasn't like Julie didn't consider it as an option. It was simply that the following words passed through her lips unbidden.
I don't want to die.
Nothing in her memories made her actively want to live, but it wasn't as though she truly wanted to die. That's right, I don't want to die. After they washed her body of all the grime, put her in expensive clothes like she'd never worn before, and fed her the most delicious food she'd had in all her life, they finally said,
From today onward, your name will be Juliet.
They had given her a name. Hearing it, she smiled. Julie didn't even know why she'd done it, but she did. It was only afterward, upon reflection, that she realized, at that moment, she finally felt like all the misery she'd experienced in her life was at an end. Her smile then must have been from relief, or so she thought. Life as a slave was far different from what she'd imagined. Granted, her imagination was limited due to her narrow life experience, but she heard how the other slaves in the slave house lamented all that happened to them. She naturally expected her despair to continue. She spent her days looking after Zenoba and learning earth magic so she could conjure and craft figurines. There were so many things she had to remember, so many orders rained upon her, and if she didn't adhere to the rules and keep promises she'd made, they'd get angry with her. It was tough work for someone so young. It didn't help that she was a slave at the university. The other students treated her poorly when Zenoba wasn't watching. Even so, she'd experienced worse before being sold into slavery. They kept her fed, let her use warm water for her baths, and gave her a cozy place to sleep. Most importantly, her master Zenoba was incredibly kind to her. He might get angry, but he would never yell at her. He was always extremely patient and made himself absolutely clear when communicating with her, despite not sharing a common tongue in the beginning. "You don't belong to me," he would say. "You are my master's slave." That was a phrase he repeated the first few months she lived with him. Honestly, he probably believed it. To him, Julie was simply on loan. That was why he was so polite to her, not as he would be with a guest perhaps, but more like he would be with a servant or maid. Julie was a hopeless mess on her own, and couldn't do anything, but Zenoba never looked down on her for it. He taught her every single thing she knew. How to clean, how to look after figurines and dolls, how to do laundry, how to keep dolls and figurines organized, how to fold clothes, proper table manners, how to wash figurines and dolls. Zenoba was pretty independent despite being royalty. Thanks to that, Julie learned to look after him in no time at all. Then she had to learn the language and skills for her craft. Rudius was the one primarily responsible for teaching her that, and he never lost his patience with her. Even when she struggled to retain vocabulary or grammar and shrunk in fear of his reproach, he kept his voice calm and kindly tried to figure out what was giving her difficulty. He was strict in his own way, however, making her repeat the same thing over and over for days until it finally stuck. To be frank, Julie wasn't too fond of Rudius in the beginning, partly because he resembled the villain in a fairy tale her parents had told her when she was younger, but partly because his words from when they first met left such a lasting impact. She knew he could end everything at the drop of a hat. If it suited him, he could rip her from the life she'd grown accustomed to. That thought made it difficult for her to relax around him. Fortunately, that feeling soon faded. Rudius didn't do anything to her even when she failed to meet his expectations. In fact, he actually showed her great consideration and smiled at her. Any anxiousness she felt gradually receded until she was fully comfortable around him. Zanoba was probably responsible for that as well. He always ate meals with her, slept nearby, and whenever she got sick or injured or even felt a little off, he would immediately rush to fetch a Rudius or a healer. When she experienced her first period the other day, he tried his best to be there for her even though he had no idea what he was doing. Panicking and fretting, at a total loss, Zanoba had truly treated her as if she were his little sister. Julie actually had no idea if he actually had any siblings or if he did, what kind of people they were. Zanoba never spoke to her about his family. On the other hand, Zanoba gushed daily about whatever figurines or dolls he'd spotted in the market, or about ones he had in his possession. He always looked genuinely happy when he did so. Perhaps he'd never had someone to share his hobby with before, but it was also natural for someone to enjoy talking about their passions. Julie guessed the reason he hadn't spoken of his house or family was because it wasn't an enjoyable conversation for him. She felt the same. She didn't really want to remember what her life was like before she became a slave. Zanoba spent each night and sometimes the afternoons babbling on and on about dolls and figures. He had a great breadth of knowledge across a variety of fields, all of it accurate and precise. Thanks to him, she gradually became more learned as well. Every time she showed off the skills or knowledge she had learned, Zanoba would be pleased and praise her, which made her even more eager to study. Ginger was strict with Julie when she arrived, particularly when it came to etiquette, clothing, and manner of speech. Julie's life didn't really change that much despite this, especially since Ginger didn't treat Julie like a slave. She regarded her as a colleague serving Zanoba. As the days went on, Julie found something precious of her own, her work making figurines. It certainly wasn't a job she had wished for. It was only something she'd started because, as a slave, her master had ordered her to do it. If she was honest with herself, however, it was pretty fun. Zanoba was frankly terrible when it came to the craft aspect of figurines, but he taught her whatever he could and provided tools if she needed them. That was how she slowly built up her skill set, one new technique at a time. The more she improved, the better she could make things exactly as she envisioned in her head. Zanoba was unerringly delighted whenever she completed a figure, but on occasions where she excelled, he didn't shower her with mere praise but allowed her to drink fine alcohol as well. As a dwarf, alcohol was like life's nectar to her. It heated her whole body and made her heart feel light and airy. It made the dark memories from her early childhood grow dim enough that she could really bask in how enjoyable the present moment was. Those feelings transformed into the energy she needed to keep working hard each day and provided the motivation to start on a new figurine. It brought Julie a great deal of delight to feel her skills improve and to see her creations bring someone else such joy. It was the first time she'd ever experienced such a thing, and it helped her devote herself to figure making. She poured all her effort into making figurines to show Zanoba. He was normally overjoyed, although he would offer strict criticism sometimes. When that happened, she would make the next one with greater care, devising ways to improve on her past failures. Sometimes the end product would be a little better, and sometimes it would be a little worse. So passed the days thus, over and over. Julie's life was peaceful and enjoyable, and she was grateful to Rudius and Zanoba for providing her with that. She earnestly prayed she could continue being with them forever, making her figurines as she did. At some point, making those figurines had transformed into her very identity. On an ordinary day among the many happy ones she'd spent in Sharia, Julie finished a figurine just as she always did. However, this one was a little different, nothing dramatic, of course. just a small difference. Naturally, since she'd made it using the same techniques she'd used on the others. She conjured the base of the figurine with earth magic and chiseled away the excess until it was of a uniform size. Then she used her knife to perfect the shape while her magic took care of polishing the rest. That was her regular process. This time, however, she noticed that something was off once it was finished, or rather, there was nothing off about the figurine at all. That was exactly what bothered her. The figurine was practically perfect. Her skills were still only at the intermediate level, so ordinarily she'd flub something in the process. It was only natural. These figurines weren't life-size figures of people, but miniatures that didn't maintain the exact proportions or anatomy. And yet this one lacked any of those expected flaws. It was well balanced. The arms and legs had natural curves. The surface was cleanly polished, and even the more intricate details were carefully tweaked to perfection. Most importantly, you could tell with a single cursory glance that the figurine was gorgeous. Julie had no idea what in particular caused it, but she remembered this peculiar sensation. When Zenoba showed her the figurines he kept carefully stowed in the very back of his dorm storage area, she had felt something similar. Simply put, they were masterpieces. When Julie realized what she was feeling, something indescribable bubbled up from the pit of her stomach, an emotion she couldn't put a name to. She never dreamed she would be able to create something like this. She thought it would take many more years before she ever crafted something equivalent to a masterpiece. No, truthfully, she wasn't confident that she'd ever accomplish such a thing. For her to achieve that now, out of nowhere, was unbelievable. It wasn't like she'd made this with a few simple hours of work. She devoted a considerable amount of time to it. She should have finished it more quickly since she used the full extent of her magic while making it, but it had taken a whole month. She used every bit of knowledge and experience she'd accumulated in creating this one, but still, never in a million years would she expect it to turn out this well. She didn't think herself capable of such a thing. If someone were to tell her to do it again, she doubted she could manage it. But there was no mistaking it. The figurine in her hands was something of her own creation. Emotion washed over her, and soon enough, a face popped into her mind, an oval-shaped one with glasses, belonging to an altogether plain-looking, mature boy Zenoba. I have to show this to Master, she thought. No doubt Zenoba would screech at the top of his lungs and circle the room gushing when he saw it. She also knew he'd shower her with praise, too. I have to let him see it immediately. With that thought in mind, she picked up the figurine, intending to head right for Zenoba. The problem was that he was on the outskirts of Sharia, working on adjusting Rudius's magic armor at the moment. If she made a dash for it, she would be able to reach him before he headed home. That would guarantee they wouldn't miss each other. Julie paused at the door, lips pinched in thought as she held the figurine in her hand. It was a top-quality piece. That much she was sure of. Every cell in her body screamed that this was a masterpiece. But could she really show it to Zenoba like this? He'd be delighted, sure, but upon consideration, all the other masterpieces he'd shown her were carefully tucked in wooden boxes lined with beautiful fabric. Every few days, Zenoba would open the boxes of his most prized figurines to check in on them. He always wore a look of deep anticipation as he pulled free the lace holding the box shut. His face would light up when he saw the figurine inside, his touch ever so delicate as he lifted it up and placed it on his desk, admiring it with a breathy sigh. Yes, a box, a necessary component in amplifying a masterpiece's quality. Julie glanced around her work area. She looked at all of the work tools and supplies she used for figurine making, but nothing there resembled a box. Since her magic supplied all the necessary materials for her craft, as per the style Rudius had taught on her, she didn't have supplies she could use to make a box with. She did, however, have a white linen bag. It jingled when she picked up. It wasn't too heavy, but it had a respectable weight. Tucked inside were some copper and silver Assyrian coins. Zenoba paid Julie a wage for all her work. She couldn't quite remember when that had started, but he insisted she take it in case she ever needed something suddenly. Lately, he'd been paying her a particularly generous amount. Ginger was none too pleased, insisting, I don't see why it's necessary for her to have money, but Zenoba ignored her protests. His insistence on paying her made her suspect Grandmaster Rudius had said something to him. Julie pondered this deeply. This was precisely the sort of situation where she needed something suddenly. She grabbed the money and headed to the artisan quarter. The place she was headed was none other than Belfried's shop. Zenoba had dragged her there numerous times before, so she knew just how much he respected the quality of Belfried's work. It was why she decided on purchasing a bed that would suit her figurine so she could present it to Zenoba. Alas, things did not turn out the way she had anticipated. The price was far steeper than she could pay. The products featured in his store were beyond her means with her current income. That was only natural since his pieces were made for nobility. Shocked as she was at the price tags, she refused to give up and tried to barter with Belfried. Zenoba was one of Belfried's valued clients. He didn't purchase any dolls, but he did have enormous praise for the beds that Belfried made. He would bring his own figurines and have Belfried construct specially made beds for them. The better the quality of work he brought in, the cheaper Belfried was willing to go with his prices. That was why she'd hoped to get a deal she could afford by showing him the figurine she had. Things didn't go the way she'd hoped this time either. Well, no, that wasn't entirely correct. Her plan was actually on point. The moment Belfried laid eyes on her figurine, his excitement skyrocketed. He screeched like an inhuman creature and scrambled back into the depths of his shop, coming back with an enormous sack of gold coins. He immediately used it to plead with her to sell to him.
I would be more than happy to make a bed for her. I'll make one so grand that she can sleep in warmth and comfort at my side for the rest of her life. You'll find no one more suited to keeping her than me, especially with my skills at bed making. I'll put that beautiful girl to rest and let her sleep peacefully on a one-of-a-kind cushion. Now, please, be a dear and accept my offer.
His eyes were unnaturally wide and drool dribbled from his mouth as he pressed in on her. Naturally, that scared her. Her entire body trembled. Julie instinctively shoved him away and made a break for the door. Belfried gave chase, but fear propelled her little legs as hard as they could go. She slammed into a shelf on her way to the door and sent the contents scattering to the floor, but she didn't look as she made her escape. Unfortunately for her, Belfried also ignored that and continued charging after her, screaming something incomprehensible as he did so. Somehow, Julie managed to shake him off her trail and made it back to the dorm room, huffing and puffing. Her body continued to tremble in fear for a while afterward. She feared he might kick the door down at any moment and come stomping in after her. Luckily, that didn't happen, and Zenoba returned later, which helped her regain her composure. Julie couldn't go back to that shop now, not after what had transpired. So what else could she do? That night, she puzzled over the matter until she at last remembered something that Rudius had told her. If you need something and you don't already have it, just make it. She couldn't remember when or why he'd said that, but regardless, they had purchased her for that very purpose, to craft things, and now she had earth magic and the tools necessary to shape whatever she conjured and polish it to perfection. The very next day, Julie began using her supplies to make a box. She conjured the basic shape with her earth magic, then used her mana and tools to trim it down. She'd done this hundreds and thousands of times before. It didn't matter that it was a box instead of a figurine in the initial phases, at least. Completing the project was difficult, though, since the more intricate details required a different process and skill set. She was still not done after several days of work, maybe about 70% through. It was impressive progress considering she'd never done anything like it before, however. As she crafted her box, a memory from her younger years came back to her. She saw her parents' faces, dimly lit in their dreary, cramped little house. She honestly didn't have many fond memories of them. They were often yelling at each other over money or otherwise looking forlorn. The only good thing she could say about them was that they did work hard. Night after night, with only a single candle for light, they slowly whittled away at something. Her father was normally boisterous during the daytime, but when night came, he was deathly silent as he wove metal together into a chain-like end product. What stood out most in Julie's memories were her mother's ornaments. Carved out of wood, she could whittle a block of wood into the most beautiful lily. Julie couldn't remember what her mother had eventually put those lilies on, but she vividly remembered the flowers themselves. With those memories as a guide, she carved lilies into her own box. Seeing it gradually approach completion made each day more enjoyable than the last. Surely Zenoba would be pleased, wouldn't he? She wondered how he would express his delight. Would he gleefully screech the way he normally did? Or would he squint so hard that his eyes vanished into his cheeks, showing more muted joy? The more she imagined it, the more her heart hammered in anticipation. As has already been written many times, Julie was truly grateful to Zenoba and Rudius. She was also satisfied with her current life. She wanted things to continue like this. That was her wish.
Julie, do you wish to stop being my slave?
Those words cut deep into her heart. She had a bad feeling the moment she saw him walk in with Belfred in tow. After all, the two were quite good friends, and she had shoved Belfred and fled his shop. When she knocked over one of his shelves in the process, she might have also damaged some of his merchandise. Only now did she realize how incredibly rude she'd been. She expected Zenoba to be angry with her. He never yelled at her, but he had been cross with her on some occasions. He was especially strict when she'd done something wrong. Sometimes he would even punish her, to make sure she understood what she did was wrong and to not make the same mistakes next time. Whenever Zenoba got angry with her, Julie would frantically try to right the wrong. Usually, that was enough to fix things. In fact, Zenoba and Rudius were always quick to forgive her. Why then? Did she panic? The answer was simple. Oh, so utterly simple. Julie pursed her lips and thought it through. She was convinced she'd upset Zenoba over her treatment of Belfried. If she had damaged his beautiful merchandise, of course Zenoba would be angry about it. Those were expensive goods produced for the nobility, which would mean a great personal loss to Belfried if they were broken. The cost would probably far overshadow any price she would fetch if they were to sell her. This was much worse than she'd anticipated. Even Rudius was involved now, and they were considering letting her go. That was her guess. Maybe it would have been different if it were just her and Zenoba. Maybe it wouldn't have ended up like this if not for her run-in with Belfried. Maybe she wouldn't have felt so much pressure if Rudius hadn't been present too. Perhaps she could have calmly considered what he was saying and answered truthfully that no, she still wanted to be of his side. But, alas, that was not the case. Julie's vision went white, her mind spinning in circles as she tried to rack her brain for a response. What should she do in this situation? She had to do something, didn't she? Her thoughts wandered to the way Belfried had acted at the shop and the price he'd offered her for her figurine. In a desperate attempt to cling to her final hope of salvaging this, Julie ran back to her room. It felt like the world was closing in around her. Her legs were unsteady as they carried her and her hands kept trembling, but she somehow managed to reach under the bed and pull out the thing she'd hidden there, the figurine, the very masterpiece she'd made herself, the one thing Belfried desperately wanted. Julie gripped her creation in her hands and hurried back to Zenoba and the others. She walked right past him and sank to her knees in front of Belfried.
I'll give this to you, so please, please forgive me.
Rudius and Zenoba were both flabbergasted by her actions. The former, in particular, never dreamed she would have such an exaggerated reaction to their query. He assumed they should gently broach the subject with Julie, since it would be difficult for her to admit she no longer wanted to be their slave. That's why he was caught off guard when Zenoba waltzed up to her and outright blurted the whole question. And now things had come to this. Of course he was utterly floored. The only person present who wasn't was Belfried. He'd planned to negotiate a price with Julie after their other discussions were dealt with, but when the object of his desires was suddenly thrust in front of him, he joyfully reached for it.
Ooh. You'll allow me to have it?
Well, if you insist.
His fingers stretched toward it. Wait. Someone grabbed his hand before he could snatch up his prize.
What's the meaning of this?
Rudius was the one who had stopped him. All traces of confusion and surprise had vanished from his face, and instead he looked both angry and on guard. Why is Julie sobbing and begging for forgiveness?
I'm afraid I haven't the foggiest.
Well, nor do I. But would you really be satisfied getting your hands on a figurine you want for free? Don't kid yourself. You know that's way too good to be true.
True, when you put it like that, I would, Master Rudius. The strength of your grip is rather painful.
Thanks to the Zaelith Gauntlet, Rudius's normal strength was amplified to an impressive degree. He held Belfried so tight that the latter couldn't pull away even if he wanted. Worse, Rudius's grip was slowly tightening. A cold sweat beaded on Belfried's forehead. No matter how chummy you are with Zenoba, that's no excuse to rob an innocent little girl of her figurine. You got that?
I truly meant what I said. I haven't the faintest idea why she's doing this, Master Zenoba, won't you help me out?
Both men glanced at Zenoba, who had been frozen in place for a whole minute now. His eyes were glued to the figurine in Julie's hands, and he hadn't moved so much as an inch. From the look on Rudius's face, he was probably thinking Zenoba, "Oh no, don't tell me you somehow died standing up," or something along those lines. Fortunately, Zenoba wasn't dead. As proof of that, his body shifted very, very slowly, almost as if time itself was trickling by at a snail's pace. He turned toward Julie and stared at her. Rudius and Belfried were struck speechless as they watched him. They gulped as they waited for him to react. Zenoba's expression was utterly ghastly, terrifying in a single word. Even Julie noticed the change in his demeanor. She turned to face him and mumbled.
I'm so sorry.
In that instant, Zenoba jerked forward and slammed down onto his knees in front of her. He reached for her hands, or more precisely, for the figurine cradled in her hands, and only stopped himself a hair's breadth from touching it.
Master?
It's incredible. It's absolutely stunning. This is, words fail to express its magnificence. From the very top of its head to the tips of its toes, it's breathtakingly beautiful. I would be at a loss to pinpoint its precise strength, but its posture, the fingertips, and the small wrinkles in the clothing, it raises the quality to a whole other level, and it all fits together perfectly. Ooh!
The way he was gushing about it, he probably longed to take the figure in his hands and study it from every angle, but for whatever reason, his fingers refused to grasp it. They remained suspended in the air, trembling. He wanted so badly to touch it, but couldn't. It was almost as if the figurine was so divine that he feared touching it.
So why then, Julie, why?
Huh?
Why did you try to give it to Belfried without even showing it to me first? Have I done something to offend you? I don't understand. You have always shown me every project you have completed before.
Zenoba started sobbing, big, ugly tears streaking down his face. Were they tears of frustration that he couldn't have this particular figurine, or was he saddened by Julie's betrayal? Rudius rudely suspected it was at least 60% the former, but we'll ignore his offensive thoughts for the moment.
I suppose you really did want to raise the money to buy your own freedom. If that's the case, why did you not speak with me first? I would happily pay 300 golden coins for this figurine. No, perhaps I couldn't pull together the funds immediately, but I swear I will find a way if necessary. I stake my honor on it, and you should be familiar enough with me by now to know how willing I would be to pay for it.
Master,
Or is it that you fear I might try to use my influence over you to steal it? I must admit, in retrospect, that you have crafted a number of figurines for me without proper compensation. I reasoned that it was fine since you're a slave and you were still inexperienced at the time, and even though you have improved immensely recently, I still haven't given you the pay you deserve.
Zenoba continued to lament, holding his head in his hands as he gazed up at the ceiling.
I am so sorry, so terribly sorry, Julie. Allow me to apologize. I'll bow in apology however many times it takes. I may not be able to offer you the same price that Belfried has, but in exchange, as your master, I will grant whatever wish you have. Thus, I must beg you, please.
Mushoku Tensei Volume 18 by Raifujin Namaganori, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit www.artale.ai and use promotion code ARTALE to activate your account. Now, enjoy the story. Before, but with Zenoba, she didn't feel fearful at all. That was because she knew he was showing consideration, not for the figurine, but for her. He most certainly wasn't angry with her, that much was clear. It wasn't that he was trying to expel her. The moment she understood that, some other emotion welled up inside her. Tears filled her eyes and soon left warm trails down her cheeks, but this time she wasn't crying out of fear or desperation.
Yes, I understand, Master.
She never had any intention of rebuffing his request to begin with. Though she sniffled through her tears, she managed to smile at him.
Ooh, thank you, Julie.
Zenoba grinned back. The atmosphere between the two was slightly awkward but tempered by warmth. Can someone please explain to me how things even came to this? Zenoba and Julie exchanged blank glances. They managed to resolve the misunderstanding quickly. By the end of the conversation, Rudius and Zenoba were immensely relieved, and even Julie looked more relaxed. Belfried apologized profusely, and in spite of his longing gazes at the figurine, he took his leave. Fortunately, Rudeus was very tolerant when people made mistakes based on misunderstandings. He quickly forgave Belfried, apologized for gripping his arm so tightly, and offered Julie and Zenoba a troubled smile before leaving for his own home. Ginger returned right as the other two were leaving. When she heard about what had happened, she scolded Zenoba, saying,
"You treat her so well and have given her such good education, one would be hard-pressed to believe she was actually a slave. There's simply no reason she would try to buy her freedom without saying a word to you first. It's discourteous of you to doubt your subjects like that, Your Highness."
Zenoba didn't really listen to her lecture, though. He was too busy studying the figurine Julie had given to him. He'd set up a pedestal in the middle of the room, placed the figurine on it, and now walked around it in circles to scrutinize every angle. At times he would smile proudly, at others he would breathe a sigh, and then he was grinning like a fool again. He was having the best time of his life. Ginger may as well have been talking to herself for all the good her speech did her. As for Julie, she kept watching Zenoba. She smiled with relief. Cheeks colored slightly red.
Julie, this is an incredible figurine. You have done well. I never dreamed you had this level of skill.
Yes, it's really only a coincidence that I managed it. I doubt I could reproduce this level of quality again.
What are you saying? This masterful craftsmanship is a product of your hard work. You made every inch of it, carefully, beautifully even. Perhaps some parts only turned out perfect by coincidence, but at least half of it is a product of your own abilities.
Thank you. I'm going to continue honing my skills.
Very good. And also, Julie, I meant what I said earlier. If there is anything you desire, you need only speak it. I will do whatever is in my power to grant your wish.
Let me think on that a little bit longer.
She said awkwardly, feeling embarrassed by all of his praise.
Your Highness, I understand how much you love your figurines, but it is nearly time to eat. Julie, help me with preparations.
Oh, of course.
She thought the moment might continue for eternity, but Ginger's interjection brought her back to reality. Perhaps the other woman was a little cross about being left out. Julie did as she was told and began helping with meal preparation as usual. Zenoba watched the two. His eyes narrowed. His life right now was rather simple, far removed from the opulence of palace living, yet he could spend all day fiddling with his figurines and no one would get mad at him. Plus, he had someone at his side that could make them for him, which provided him with the constant source of new figurines. Nothing could be more ideal.
It would be wonderful if I could keep living like this forever.
Suddenly, he noticed a sealed letter sitting nearby the door. Julie must have received it on his behalf while he was out. He casually strode over and picked it up, then checked who the sender was. The happy expression disappeared from his face. He slit the envelope open, pulled out the letter, and glanced over its contents.
I suppose there was no way it could ever last.
The envelope slipped through his fingers and fluttered through the air before coming to rest on the floor. The seal of the Shironi Kingdom seal was stamped upon it. Chapter 12, The Next Battle. I awoke to the melody of a tree sparrow's song. No, morning already? Morning already? I stretched and let a yawn spill out as the bones in my back cracked audibly. Beside me slept a girl with blue hair, bathed in the morning sunlight that poured through the window. Other people called her Roxy, but I called her God. Beside her was a tiny baby with similarly blue hair. As the child of a human and a god naturally, this baby was Perseus, kidding, of course. It was our daughter, Laura. Leo, the sacred beast, was curled up on the floor just beside the bed, looking for all intents and purposes like a white puffball. Ever since we got official approval to keep him from the beast folk, he seemed even more smug than usual. Or maybe I only felt that way because Linnea and Prasenna were constantly acting subservient to him. I'd thought him awfully attached to Lara from the start, but I never dreamed it was because she was the savior. That was a startling revelation for sure. though on the other hand, I could probably have seen it coming. It was hard to believe our little girl was that special. As proud as that made me as her father, I would have to do my best not to let it show. Showing favoritism wasn't good, and I didn't want to put a sad look on Lucy's sweet little face.
Oh, good morning, Rudy.
She scrubbed at her eyes groggily and sat up. Since she often breastfed Lara, her shirt was left hanging open, her chest completely exposed. I couldn't allow myself to hungrily ogle them, lest such blasphemy end in me losing my eyesight completely, but I can hardly help myself. It's like they're begging me to look at them. Oh God on high, have mercy on me.
Huh? Why is Lara here? Did you bring her in here, Rudy?
She tilted her head and reached down to gently stroke her baby's head. Don't you remember bringing her in here last night yourself?
I did?
After we had a little romp in bed and fallen asleep, Lara began crying in the middle of the night, a rather rare event for her. Roxy groggily pulled herself upright and tottered out of the room. She changed Lara's diaper, breastfed her, then came back here and rocked her to sleep before nodding off herself. Leo had, as always, stuck by her side her the entire time. If she didn't remember, though, it was no big deal. I'm going to leave to do my morning training.
All right. I'm off today, so I'll probably sleep in with Lara for a little while more.
As soon as she finished uttering the words, she collapsed against the pillows once more. All right, sleep well,
I will.
she muttered, before immediately drifting back to sleep. I slipped away and got changed before starting down the hallway. A thought suddenly occurred to me, and I paused at Sylphie's door to peek in. She was still sleeping with Lucy right beside her. They both looked like they were happily enjoying dreamland. We had given Lucy her own bedroom, but she slept with Sylphie at night. Perhaps it might be nice occasionally to sleep together, the three of us all sprawled out in a line. But unfortunately, I had a strong libido, and being with any of my wives usually led to sex. There was no way I could do something like that in front of Lucy, especially since she was old enough to remember. Right now, I was satisfied by seeing them happily curled up together. I left without a word, nudging the door shut. Since I'd already checked in on them, I decided to peek into Eris's room too. She was always up in the wee hours, so I figured she'd be wide awake by now. Squeaked a voice. I spotted a silhouette on the bed. There was a girl, holding her hands over both ears as her whole body trembled. Her breasts were enormous, but she didn't have red hair. Those ears she was holding were dog ears, and she had a tail. Her eyes were normally half-masked and sleepy-looking, but right now they were welling up with tears.
Oh, boss. Morning.
After the incident in the Great Forest, she had returned with us to Sharia. Someone was extremely happy to see her, and surprise, surprise, it was Eris. The moment she spotted Prasenna, she licked her chops and said, "That's an incredibly cute girl you brought back with you." Linnea shuddered when she saw Eris's reaction, but Prasenna didn't share that sense of foreboding. Instead, she puffed out her chest and grinned proudly. "See how great I am? Boss's wife only had to take one look at me before deciding she likes me." A mischievous gleam danced in Linea's eyes as she nodded eagerly and egged Prasenna on. "Yeah, it sure is incredible, Mew. Only you could win the favor of the Berserker Sword King that quickly, Mew. It's too bad. I wish I could be as lucky as you, Mew." "You couldn't pull it off," Prasenna shot back at Linnea, getting a little ahead of herself. She wagged her tail as she approached Eris, who promptly scratched the back of her ears and complimented her tail. The amount of touching Eris did was a bit intense for a first encounter, but perhaps because Prasenna was a dog-type beast woman, she simply wagged her tail and said, "I really am wicked. My charms are so overwhelming I've even captivated the boss's woman." She shot me a sidelong glance. I forced a smile back at her. Normally I would have found her attitude annoying, but since I already knew where this was going, it was hard to do anything but gaze at her sympathetically. Seeing how willing Prasenna was, Eris sensed her opportunity to pounce. "You must be lonely sleeping by yourself now that you're back here. I'd be happy to sleep with you occasionally," she offered. Prasenna nodded eagerly. "At this rate, it'll only be a matter of time before I've climbed back to the top." She didn't notice Linnea snickering at her, but that sealed the deal. She would periodically spend her nights with Eris. Persina soon discovered for herself the bone-breaking power of Eris's embrace, which was precisely why she'd ended up in her current state.
My chest hurts so much.
Since she was suffering, I used my magic to heal her. Her breasts were as voluptuous as I remembered. I'd already spent a passionate night with Roxy, so I was more than sated for the moment.
Thank you.
I left her and proceeded downstairs, heading for the entrance. A wooden sword leaned against the wall, which I grabbed before heading out. Eris stood just outside, arms crossed and her stance wide. Her stomach was noticeably swollen, thanks to her pregnancy, but she still looked like a most intimidating guard. Eris, good morning.
Morning, Rudius.
She was in good spirits today. I could tell by the look on her face. Apparently, she deeply enjoyed cuddling Persina through the night. Persina and Linnea currently lived close to our mercenary headquarters. They shared an apartment much like the one Cliff lived in, and the fact that they could cohabit like that was proof of their good relationship. They took turns coming over every night to check on Leo. They were caretakers in name only, but I was pleased to not have them living here, lest it caused the same friction with my family. Eris would alternate between the two, periodically summoning someone to her room to act as her sleeping pillow. Linnea tried her best to escape, but Eris wasn't about to let her go. Not until her debt was paid. Whenever one of them was dragged off to a room, they'd shoot pleading looks at me, praying for intervention, but I was actually pretty jealous of them. It would be nice if Eris would occasionally call me to her room. I was part of her harem too, after all. It'd be great if she'd show me some love. Perhaps she'd be more open with her affections once she'd given birth. Wait, aren't things usually the other way around? That's odd. I thought I was supposed to be the backbone of the family. Oh well. So, what are you up to?
I was thinking about our baby's name. I say he needs a valiant one.
Was that something people normally thought about while standing outside at the crack of dawn? I really thought she was trying to be a guard dog or something. A valiant name? I guess that might be a good idea if we're having a boy.
I was thinking ours, Aldebaran or Kalman.
I think those are a little too valiant. She'd literally named a bunch of famous heroes from the past. They were all good names, of course. Still, I feared giving our child such an old-fashioned name might lead to them getting bullied.
What are you thinking, Rudius?
I've been thinking of girls' names, like Alice, Fran. I think a beautiful, refined one might fit best.
You're gonna give our son a girl's name.
I just think that if you do end up having a girl, it'd be pretty sad for her to be given a male name because we haven't thought up any alternatives.
It's definitely going to be a boy.
Just to appease her and stay on the safe side, it might be good to come up with neutral names that could work in any case, like Maki or Kaoru. Wait, those wouldn't work? Those aren't recognized names here? Well, I'm gonna get some running in, so I'll catch you later.
All right. See you later.
She had recently stopped practicing with her sword, at least. She was probably around 6 months pregnant by now. I wasn't sure whether she was finally conscious of the baby in her belly or if it was pure instinct that stopped her from pushing herself so hard. Eris still didn't seem like a mother at all, but she was going to have this child anyway. With all sorts of thoughts racing through my head, I started my morning jog. The whole family gathered for breakfast. Lilia and Aisha served everyone, while Zenith sat with a vacant expression, with Norn beside her. Thanks to a stroke of fortuitous timing, my days off coincided with Norn's visits home. Lucy was right next to her, legs dangling adorably from her chair. Sylphie sat on Lucy's other side and nagged at her to sit properly. Roxy was across from them, eyes still heavy with sleep as she nursed Lara. The baby shared her drowsy expression as she suckled away. Eris looked dignified as she sat neatly in her chair, happily stroking Persenna's head, which rested on her lap. Persenna looked utterly exhausted and put up no protest, but the moment she saw food being carried over, she sat up, tail wagging. She was a simple one, no doubt about it. My spot was right next to Eris, at the very end of the table, the head of the table, one might say. Not that such a thing existed in our house. Our table was enormous, yet it felt awfully tiny with so many people around it. We had run out of rooms for everyone, and it wouldn't be long before Lara started getting bigger. I guess Norn might already be moving out by the time that happens. I wondered what she planned to do once she graduated. Aisha seemed likely to stay here even after she reached adulthood. Norn?
Yes, what is it, big brother?
What do you plan to do after you graduate?
I haven't really thought about it.
Oh, okay. Well, she was still a minor and only a 5th year at the university. Plus, she was busy being student council president. Maybe it was only natural that she hadn't given it much thought yet.
Big brother?
Yes?
If that is, hypothetically speaking,
Hmm?
I were to say I wanted to become an adventurer, would you oppose it?
An adventurer. Huh. Norn becoming an adventurer. Well, she was decent enough with a blade, and after 5 years of training, her magical abilities had grown. She'd probably make a fine adventurer. I could only guess she'd come to idolize them, having heard from Paul about his adventures. That didn't mean I wasn't worried, though. This was Norn, after all. She might do something utterly clumsy at some point and die on the spot. Of course, given how utterly adorable she was, I was sure boys would swarm her if she did become an adventurer. I couldn't keep myself from imagining the worst, since my work involved aiding adventurers caught in sticky situations. I wouldn't oppose it, but I would worry. Do you really want to become an adventurer?
No, not particularly. The thought just popped into my mind.
I wondered if she was downplaying the truth. Once she graduated, she could surely find steady work that paid better than adventuring did. Perhaps she was looking for something besides money. Still, I wanted to respect any decision she made as much as I could.
Thank you for the food. I'm off to school.
Even though Roxy and the other professors had the day off, Norn still had duties with the student council to attend to. It had to be rough. All right, have a good day. After we all bid her farewell, Norn left for the university.
Personally, I'd be opposed to it. I don't see any way she could hack it as an adventurer.
I think you should let her do whatever she wants to do. It's a big thing to come up with a dream for yourself.
I also oppose it. Miss Norn is master and mistress's precious daughter. She should marry into an appropriately respectable family and live a secure, peaceful life.
I say let her do it. Her swordsmanship is still lacking, but being an adventurer is fun.
Everyone started weighing in with their own opinions the minute Norn left. Of course, this wasn't a matter we could decide via family meeting. It was just idle discussion.
You can become an adventurer anywhere in the world. Even if we all opposed it, she could run off and become one without saying a word to us if she wanted to.
Her words had real weight since they were spoken from experience. And that was that for breakfast. After that, I accompanied Aisha and Persena to our mercenary HQ. Persena's work mostly consisted of assisting Linnea, which made her more of a secretary than anything else, but she took the title of assistant vice chief for herself. She sat in her office wearing all black and sporting sunglasses. Even though she didn't smoke cigarettes as she did it, she still seemed to be enjoying herself. Maybe I should buy special hats for the leadership. Okay, you guys work hard.
You got it, boss!
Today we're going to rake in the dough again.
Just be sure you don't do anything too wicked. Aisha handed me a list of all our mercenary band's members. There were about 50 names in total. She'd marked out which ones were particularly good at handling paperwork. I planned to show the list to Orsted so we could select whoever had the lowest chance of being one of the man god's apostles. I'd then interview that candidate, and if they seemed serious enough, I'd appoint them to help out with office administration and document filing.
If that's what you need, wouldn't it be better to just employ me instead?
I couldn't take her up on that. I was confident she would do phenomenal work. Of course, the problem was the risk of her glimpsing Orsted directly or otherwise falling under his curse, which might turn her hostile toward him. If she vehemently opposed me working for him, it would make it really hard to continue what I was doing. Aisha normally spent her days idly, but she could produce results almost instantly if she put her mind to it. By the time I caught on to what was happening, she'd already have Orsted drowning at the bottom of the ocean. That's how it played out in my mind, anyway. I realized it was probably exaggerated concern. I want you to look after the mercenary band. After I left the office, I went straight to Orsted and reported on all that had transpired this past month, such as how I'd appointed Linnea and Persenna heads of my mercenary band, along with Aisha, who acted as their assistant. He expressed no opposition to my choices.
Such a thing never existed in my past loops. Go ahead and continue doing what you're doing.
Far from being displeased by it, Orsted seemed amused by the goings-on. He also gave me permission to hire people to work at this office, and selected acceptable candidates from my list. Perhaps he was actually excited about it all. Are you sure Linnea and Persina are fine the way they are, though? It's not going to have too much of an impact on the way things play out in the future, is it?
As long as one of them becomes the matriarch in the end, it will have no big impact on the future.
Well, Persenna had managed to cling to her position as a potential candidate by the skin of her teeth at least. And although the others had thoroughly bashed Linnea, she could probably fill the matriarch role in Persenna's place if she was of the mind to do it. I could throw in my support and help her out if needed.
Most of the people who become involved with you have their destinies dramatically changed in the process. Therefore, I am unable to say anything with any certainty.
Well, pardon me. I'm just trying to live a normal life, you know. Anyway, I never dreamed my daughter would be some kind of savior. Did you already know about that, sir?
No. A different man has always been the Sacred Beast's partner in the past.
That was only natural. Lara didn't exist in the other loops, after all.
But, judging by what you told me, it seems clear the man-god made a concerted effort to keep you and Roxy apart, so I suspected she had a strong destiny.
I guess that means our little girl knocked someone else from their rightful place and took the seat herself, huh? By the way, about the guy who was originally supposed to be the savior, what was he set to accomplish?
He was the man who would eventually go on to defeat demon god Laplace.
Oh, okay. Are you sure everything is all right since he's not going to be the savior, though?
It doesn't matter. Laplace is someone I will have to kill anyway. It's true that I owed the Sacred Beast and his partner for what they did for me, but they aren't truly necessary pieces on the board.
My understanding was that he'd fought Laplace numerous times through his multiple loops, and the so-called savior had been a staunch ally each time. However, Laplace wasn't so formidable that he needed that ally to win. I suppose that means Lara is also destined to fight Laplace eventually.
Difficult to say, but there's no doubt that she'll be a big hindrance to the man-god.
We could only guess that she'd play a big role in defeating the man-god in the future, but nothing was set in stone. Most of the things happening in this loop were completely new to Orsted after all. I suppose that means he may continue trying to target her in the future? That was my true worry right now. Of course I was concerned, knowing someone might be after my adorable little daughter.
That's precisely why you summoned the Sacred Beast. He has a strong destiny himself, so the man-god will struggle to interfere with either of them.
Okay then.
Besides, if anything were to happen, I have no intention of leaving your family to die. There's no need for you to worry.
He was doing his best to reassure me, so I should feel at ease for the time being. I'll just have to focus on doing what I can do. Yes, all I had to do was continue preparing for the next big battle as I had been. I still had some lingering anxiety about Lara, but simply worrying wouldn't solve anything. All right. After that, I left our office and headed to the school, wondering if Zenoba and Cliff's research was proceeding apace. I hoped we could lower my magic armor's mana consumption a little more. The way it was right now, I was the only one who could use it. On the other hand, if we made the mana consumption rate too economical, and the man-god's cronies stole it for themselves, we'd be in some real trouble. Anyway, who should I visit first? I suspected Cliff was hard at work trying to make a second child with Elenialis. For whatever reason, those two always went at it hard in the morning. They probably had sex in the morning, then spent the day recharging before doing it again at night, day after day. Or so I suspected anyway. The way they're going, I'll be shocked if Cliff doesn't turn into an emaciated shell. That left me with one option, to go see Zenoba first, as I usually did. That way I could check in on his research progress. with the magic armor and test it out. After that, I could tell him about the mercenary band I'd created and consult him about my plan to recruit some members as store clerks. After that, I could grab lunch and go to see Cliff. If he'd completed another one of his prototypes, we could take it to Orsted and give it a trial run. Yep, that sounded like a good plan. With that in mind, I headed for the research building. Okay, I won't deny being a fool, but it's awfully rude to badmouth someone like that all of a sudden. I'm not that stupid.
You should understand, shouldn't you?
Yes, I know. I was just messing around. I know whoever's saying all this isn't directing it at me. I searched for the source of the shouting and found it rather quickly. A group of 5 men and women stood on the stair landing, arguing with one another. Shockingly, I knew every single one of them.
You're basically going to your own death.
The person who'd been shouting the entire time was Cliff. He grabbed Zenoba by the collar of his shirt and was angrily tearing into him. Elenize was standing directly behind him, cradling their baby with a troubled look. Zenoba stared at Cliff with a cold look in his eyes, not budging an inch. Ginger hovered behind him, sending Cliff a weak, pleading look. Julie was at her feet, staring at Zenoba with watery eyes, as if she might break into tears at any moment. Even for an argument, it was odd to find them like this. I wonder what could have happened. I can only hope it's not another crazy misunderstanding like the one that happened yesterday. Zenoba, Cliff. They flinched and turned my way. Cliff's look was entreating while Zenoba remained unreadable. No, it went beyond that. It was the first time he'd ever looked at me like I was an insignificant insect. But I had seen that look before in the past. When was it again?
Master, your timing is most fortuitous. I was about to go visit you.
It's good you came, Rudius. Help me convince Zenoba.
Both Zenoba and Cliff spoke at the same time. Zenoba pulled a face and somewhat violently pushed Cliff away. He didn't seem to actually make use of his strength, but as a blessed child with monstrous power, he still managed to knock Cliff off his feet and onto his ass. His expression turned apologetic for a split second, but he didn't bother to verbalize it, instead making his way over to me. Zenoba stood slightly taller than I did, and his gaze seemed to pierce right through me. What happened?
I was hoping to entrust Yuri to your care. We may have bought her using my money, but she was always your slave to begin with.
Julie looked like she was about to cry. No, she was already crying. His words were the last straw that sent her over the edge. She clenched at the hem of her clothes and lowered her gaze. The tears rolled down her cheeks continuously, splattering on the ground below. Her shoulders trembled as shuddering sobs escaped past her lips. I caught her whispering something as well.
You promised you would listen to my request.
Poor thing. Zenoba, if this is the start of a whole new weird misunderstanding, I'm not going to be very happy with you. Understand me, I won't be making any more figurines for you. So you plan to leave Julie and go where, exactly?
Home. I have received a royal command to return.
A royal command, huh? In other words, orders from the king? But why would Cliff be so opposed to it if that was all it was? He was hardly the type to dissuade Zenoba simply because the guy's graduation was 6 months away.
My younger brother Pax has successfully wrested power, killing my father and older brother and taking the crown for himself.
Huh? Pax? The 7th prince that took Lilia captive? Or wait, was he the 6th prince? And he managed to throw a coup d'etat and an ascent to the throne. Wait, that means he's king now, right?
The insurrection left his forces exhausted, and now a foreign power has moved in to attack. I was summoned back to help fortify our defenses. Thus, I will be taking my leave for a little while.
He spoke as casually as if he were suggesting running to the convenience store to grab a quick snack. But I knew, based on what he had told me, what he really meant. That next battle I kept trying to prepare myself for was already upon us, and far quicker than I had anticipated.